Buenos días. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Observatory of the Spanish Language and Hispanic Cultures in the United States, in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences at Harvard University. As you know, Instituto Cervantes is a Spanish institution devoted to promote the use and study of the Spanish language and to spread the culture and thought in Spanish. We are a network of 90 centers in 44 countries around the world, and we offer courses of Spanish in the network, online and on-site, as well as the official exams of Spanish as a foreign language, the DELE, Diploma de Español como Lengua Extranjera. By the way, the Cervantes Observatorio is a DELE exam center since this May. So from now on, if your students are interested in taking the DELE exam, this observatory may provide you all the information you need. Nevertheless, Instituto Cervantes at Harvard University is not a center as some other Cervantes centers. It's an observatory of the Spanish language. So the mission of the Cervantes Observatorio is to observe, to analyze and debate on Spanish language and Hispanic cultures in the United States. And in order to accomplish this mission, the Observatorio organizes and hosts academic activities and publishes the journal Informes del Observatorio, Observatorio Reports, which is a free online bilingual and monthly journal. You may find it on the Observatorio website, and you may find some copies out there in the Observatorio. This event today is a conversation in the Observatorio about teaching Spanish as a heritage language, with a presentation by Professor Kim Potofsky. I want to thank Professor Kim Potofsky for being here today. I want to thank you all for coming up to this Observatorio facilities. And I am delighted to express my deeper gratitude to Maria Luisa Parra. She's a senior preceptor at Harvard University, and she will do the introduction, and she will do the honors for this event. So thank you very much for coming here, and now please join me to welcome Maria Luisa Parra and Kim Potofsky.
Well, thank you very much, Paco, for this introduction, for you being here in this Friday morning. Well, this is the third talk that we have had as part of this Roma's Language and Literatures Department initiative on the teaching of Spanish as a heritage language that I have started a couple of years ago. And it has been supported by Professor Moreno Fernandez and the Observatorio, as well as the Provostial Office and the department that has funded and supported these events. And the purpose of these talks have been to, invite experts in the field of the Spanish as heritage language to share with us, their research, their insights. As we will see, and we have seen through these talks, Spanish in the U.S. has grown so much, and it's so important that we are aware of what's going on. So I want to welcome Professor Kim Potofsky. We are colleagues, friends. Yesterday she was saying that we share a passion for a Mexican candy called Fresca, so that's even a more powerful bond between us. She is Associate Professor of Spanish at the Department of Hispanic and Italian Studies at the University of Illinois at Chicago, but she's also faculty affiliate to the Social Justice Initiative and faculty affiliate to the Latin American and Latino Studies Initiative at the same university. She has a PhD from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Her major interests are heritage language development, Spanish in the US, language and identity, dual immersion and education. She teaches many courses at the undergraduate and graduate levels. I'm just going to mention some titles so you can see the scope of her work. Introduction to Hispanic Linguistics, Spanish in the US, Language Teaching Methods, the Acquisition of Spanish, Spanish in Society, Spanish for Heritage Speakers, Teaching Spanish to Heritage Speakers, Second Language Acquisition and Bilingualism, and Sociolinguistic Research Field Methods. She has several books. I'm going to tell you the main titles. In 2015, El Español de los Estados Unidos with Ana María Escobar, Cambridge University Press. Heritage Language Teaching, Research and Practice, 2014 with Sarah Baudry and Cindy Ducar. Language Diversity in the U.S. is our edited volume. It's a wonderful volume to have an overview of the linguistic landscape in this country. She has 2 textbooks, Conversaciones Escritas and Dicho y Hecho, that it's already in its 8th edition. She has another book, Bilingual Youth, Spanish Speakers in English-Speaking Countries, which I had the pleasure to do the review. It's a wonderful book. If you want to have, again, an overview of what is going on with Spanish around the world in different countries and through different methodologies, it's really worthwhile reading that book. Language and Identity in Dual Immersion School, and Fundamentos de la Enseñanza del Español a los Hablantes Nativos en los Estados Unidos. That it's, was an invitation from Paco, and it's in Spanish.
My very first book, empezó todo ahí.
Very good. She's also the executive editor of the journal Spanish in Context and co-editor of the Heritage Language Journal. She also has a wonderful TED Talk, No Child Left Monolingual, which has, I checked yesterday, it has 19,572 views. I'm sure that you'll reach the 20,000 today with all of us here. And she also has received many fellowships and awards. I'm going to mention 2 that are very relevant to me. She got this fellowship from the Institute for the Humanities at the University of Illinois at Chicago for her project, Do You Bleed Salsa or Sofrito? Inter-Latino Language and Identity Among Mexicans. She also won the Dean's Award for Faculty Research in the Humanities for her project, Transnational Youth. And another award for the Council for Excellence in Teaching and Learning Teaching Recognition Program Award. So we have it's a privilege, it's an honor to have her here, and I want to welcome her. Thank you, Kim, for being here.
Thank you, Maria Luisa. Thank you so much.
I don't want to be rude, but before you start talking, and I don't want to forget, I just want to remind you or let you know that we're going to be having a summer institute here in June 1st to June 4th. If you go to the website of the National Heritage Language Resource Center, you'll find this, link. You can click there and you can register. It's an institute for researchers, but also for educators and practitioners. I'm going to pass around a flyer with information with the workshops that we're going to be offering and the schedule for the institute. If you want to register, I suggest that you do it the sooner the better, because these spaces fill out soon. So can you please do it? Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you. Thank you, Maria Luisa, for that introduction. Can you hear me? Yeah, because I've got this mic on, but I've never been accused of having a low voice. So I'm also going to turn this around. I'm just kind of, desayuné frijoles. I need to move a little bit. So voy a voltear esta mesa así para poderme mover, porque sentada me siento como en camisa de fuerzas. 19,000 views. I think 18,000 of them were my mom, actually. But that was really a labor of love. It's one of these things, those of us here in the room, we kind of share the same gospel, but trying to get these points out to other folks is sometimes a challenge. So that was definitely a welcome challenge. So I don't know if you know how lucky you are here in Boston. If you don't know, I'm going to tell you 3 reasons why I think you're really lucky. The first is that you have Maria Luisa Parra here at Harvard. She's putting her series of workshops that she's been doing about teaching Spanish to heritage speakers has been phenomenal. It goes back several years. We were here several years ago as well. So those of you involved in the teaching of Spanish have a fantastic resource in Maria Luisa. The second reason that you're very lucky is that you now have Paco and the Observatorio here. Y veo que mucho se puede observar desde acá. It's very nice. This is going to be the center for compiling all the stuff that's coming out about Spanish in the US. So students, scholars, educators alike will be able to just come to this website and find all kinds of stuff, get inspired, see the gaps in the research, see what's been done, etc. And then the third reason is this right here. This institute is fantastic. We held it at the University of Illinois at Chicago 2 or 3 years ago, summer of 12, I think. Lots and lots of folks come. It's got something for everybody. It's got something for your linguists who are looking at morphological stuff. It's got somebody for your educators who want to know what to do on Monday morning in the classroom. Just top shelf people. And so that's the third reason why you're, there are many more reasons why you're lucky here in Boston, but those are just 3 that have to do with the teaching of Spanish. So now I have to figure out how to shift this over to my PowerPoint, right? Okay, since it's not my computer, you know, if I touch it wrong, it's going to explode, I think. So I think we just go over there, right? Thank you so much. I'm a Mac person. I have to become more bilingual and learn how to use PCs. Okay, so yeah, once again, thanks to Paco and to Maria Luisa Parra for inviting me, and thanks to all of you for being here. I understand that the structure is going to be, I'm probably going to talk, I planned for 45. It'll probably be more like an hour, because that's how I am. Then we'll take a pause, I believe, have some refreshments, and then we'll come back in, and we will share thoughts, questions, ideas, etc. Does that sound good? Yeah? Okay. So put on your seatbelts. Here we go. I'm going to divide this talk in the following way. I'm going to look at who heritage speakers are, just a general sense of who they are linguistically, academically, and affectively. If you're not already convinced of this, I hope you leave here today convinced that heritage speakers are very, very different from second language learners, and they need, thus, to have different types of coursework, okay? Some good general approaches to teaching Spanish to heritage speakers. Certainly you could have an entire 16-week course on this, and I'll do it, you know, in 10 minutes. And then I want to say a quick word about the kinds of teacher preparation that I think are necessary to be a good teacher of Spanish to heritage speakers. So you're probably aware that we use a lot of different terminology. Some say Spanish for native speakers. Some say Spanish for bilingual students. Some say Spanish for heritage speakers. Some use all these terms interchangeably, okay? I tend to use the term heritage speaker. And Guadalupe Valdez is the one who offered what has become the canonical definition in the field. This is an individual who's raised in a home where a non-English language is spoken. They may speak the non-English language, in our case Spanish, but of course there are many, many heritage languages here in the US. They may speak it, they may only understand it, in fact, which we would call a receptive bilingualism. Note that we don't call it passive. There's nothing passive about understanding a language, right? But some can understand it but not speak it. Have you ever met someone like that? They understand what you're saying, but they just don't produce it back. Okay. And they are to some degree bilingual, right? The fact that they can understand you means they've got some type of grammar in their heads. This is what some call the narrow definition of heritage speaker. There's also a broader definition, which includes those who we could say have a heritage motivation. Okay? I understand that, for example, the Navajo community is very interested in embracing as wide a group as possible, casting a wide net. You're a heritage speaker of Navajo. Okay? Although I think they would probably say a heritage learner of Navajo. Even though they don't have any Navajo system or grammar or syntax or lexicon or anything in their heads, they want to be inclusive with that definition. I'm working with the narrow one, which means that there's something in your head that makes you different from somebody who has zero knowledge of the Spanish language. Does that make sense? That's the definition I'm working with. You're probably already aware that the United States has now reached 17% Latino population. I'm using the terms Latino and Hispanic interchangeably, and I hope that doesn't offend anyone. I understand that these terms are very contested. But we also know that they predict it's going to be 24. So that's 1 out of 5 people in this country, right, are projected to be of Latino origin by 2050. I'm going to put it at 2035. You heard it here first. Okay? I think it's coming a lot more quickly. However, the school population is already there. It's already 23% of kids in schools who are of Latino origin. And if you go to a lot of urban areas, you find schools where the population is majority Latino. So 1/3 of schools in Chicago, their student population is majority Latino, 50 to 100% Latino. Does that make sense? This does not mean 33% of Chicago public schools is Latino. It's actually more like 40. But what it means is that 1/3 of the schools are majority Latino. Does that make sense? Okay. It's also the same in New York. In Miami, it's about half of the schools where the school population is majority Latino. In Los Angeles, ni se diga, it's like 3 out of 4 schools are majority Latino schools, okay? This map usually surprises no one. When you ask people, so where is Spanish spoken in the US? What do they always respond? They say, well, the Southwest. So this darker color here is the concentration, more than 50% of Latinos in that area. We will return to the fact that Hispanic Latino does not equal Spanish speaking, okay? But this gives us a broad sense of where these populations reside. They'll tell you, oh, the Southwest, Florida, New York. If they're smart, they'll say Chicago. Paco helped put Chicago on the map with the Cervantes, right? So this map typically doesn't surprise anybody. What does tend to surprise people is this map. This is the percent change in the Latino population between 1990 and 2000. So this dark purple color is a gain of 200% or more, okay? And so what you're seeing is that these areas that historically have not had large Latino populations are now exploding in the Latino population. My understanding is that a lot of this has to do with agriculture work and the meat processing industries, right, that are bringing in a lot of immigrants. Also, my neighbors here in Iowa and up in Minnesota are seeing a huge growth in this population. So this is 90 to 2000. This is 2000 to 2010. Again, I noticed here, and what's going on here in Western Massachusetts, that you've got this 100% change. What's out there? What's going on? Okay. All right. Got it, outside of Springfield. Okay, because that is blowing up. What's that? It seems to be on the border here with New York, actually, but eso me llamó la atención. But anyway, it continues to be in areas. Now, of course, the low numbers make it quite easy to have a 100, right? When you had 4 Latinos in the town, it's easy to have a 200% growth in the Latino population. But the point being that this is really significant. And I remember reading in a newspaper a few years ago, I believe it was North Carolina, which had a 430% growth or something like that. First grade classrooms, 25 kids, no, it was kindergarten. 25 kids, none of them spoke a lick of English, all Spanish speakers, and there wasn't a teacher in the district who spoke any Spanish at all. So this has come very, very quickly. However, some universities are starting to take notice. The University of North Carolina, Wilmington, created a heritage speaker specialist position on their campus. They heard the train coming, they were very proactive, and now that program is really doing wonderful things. So I looked a little bit about Massachusetts. You may know it's about 10% Latino in the state. Almost double that here in Boston. You knew that, right? Okay. Did you know that Massachusetts is one of 6 states in the country that attributes almost all of its growth to the Hispanic population in the last 10 years? Almost all of your growth in this state has been from the Latino population. That's pretty significant. Almost 70% of your Latino population is native born, but that's kind of tricky because that includes Puerto Rico. If you're born and raised in Puerto Rico, yeah, you're native born, but culturally, you are from another country, we could say. Culturally, linguistically, would you agree? I think that's deceiving to say, oh, they're native born. That sounds like they were raised in the US when the truth is otherwise. So we have to really dig into that a little bit further to see what that means, okay? Did you know Massachusetts is #1 in the nation for percentage of Hispanics of non-Mexican origin? I think you might recently have reached #1. I would venture to guess New York until recently was #1 because of the huge Dominican and Puerto Rican populations. But do you know that the Mexican population in New York is the fastest growing Mexican population in the country? So they are now super mixed in New York, okay, as far as their Latino origin folks. But y'all up here, you don't have a lot of Mexicans, is what I learned from this, which I found rather interesting. Probably going to change soon, I would think. I would venture to guess that a lot of those folks out in the western portion of the greenhouses you were talking about, if I had a nickel to bet, I'd say probably a lot of them are of Mexican origin. Okay. So what do we conclude from all this? Doesn't matter where you live in this country, right? Up until maybe 10 years ago, you could have the quote-unquote luxury of saying, yeah, I don't need to know about this heritage speaker stuff. I'm in North Carolina. I'm in Iowa. I'm in Western Massachusetts. I don't need to know about this stuff. But now it's pretty much the case that you are going to have heritage speakers in your class, in spite of the fact that most of us who are Spanish teachers, we're very professional, we're very diligent, we go to college, we take classes at the Cervantes, we try to become the best Spanish teachers and speakers that we can possibly be, yet we've never received any kind of professional development for working with heritage speakers, okay? So just in this room, a show of hands, how many of you teach heritage speakers or have heritage speakers in the institutions where you teach? Okay, it's more than half. You're like, well, I used to, okay. Tú eres parte del grupo, no te preocupes. And how many of you who just had your hands up received some kind of professional development when you were going through, okay, so one hand, right. This is a sad state of affairs. It doesn't mean that we're not well-intentioned. It doesn't mean that some of us don't do a good job without that kind of training. But I think an interesting metaphor to consider is the following. When you go to college and you decide you want to be an English teacher, okay, you have to make a decision. You're asked an important question. Do you want to teach English as a second language to folks who don't know it, who are acquiring it, need to improve it? Or do you want to teach English as a native language, English language arts? Okay, and by that I'm referring to the classes in English that I might have taken. I grew up in Long Island, New York. You know, I had to take English classes. When you grow up in a country, you take, right, and that's called language arts. So when you show up to college and say, I want to be an English teacher, these two things, English as a second language and English native language arts, are housed in different colleges. They have completely different curricula. In fact, they lead to different state certifications for you to teach that. In no principal, high school principal's mind would it ever occur to them to say, oh, you're an ESL teacher? Great, I need you to teach the native language. It would be illegal, in fact. If you don't have the certification to do it, you can't do it. You follow what I'm saying here? Yet in the field of Spanish, what we say, oh, you're an SSL teacher, a Spanish as a second language teacher? Great, go teach the heritage speakers. Do you see the problem? This is a really strong disconnect. This is a really pernicious and pervasive assumption that we make about the teaching of Spanish to heritage speakers. And that's, I think, a really important point to make to our administrators who say, well, why do you need a separate class for them? Right? Or even worse is when they say, que estudien francés. They already speak Spanish, let them take something else. Okay? So we're going to talk today about some of the arguments we can use to counter those ideas. So as I said in the introduction, I'm going to look at some of the ways that these two groups are different. I like to say that the L2 second language students are like oranges, and then the heritage speakers are like apples. Okay? All our students are like fruity, if you will. But they are different. They're different linguistically, affectively, and academically. And we're going to look at just a few of the ways. Let's first look at some of the linguistic ways. If you're familiar with Silvina Montru's work out of Urbana, or some of the other psycholinguistic research, or even the sociolinguistic research, you could basically look at the linguistic differences between heritage speakers and second language learners in a 16-week course, reading tons and tons and tons of books and articles. And I'm going to do it in 2 slides, okay? I'm really going to summarize this, the nitty-gritty. The nitty-gritty is that the path of Spanish acquisition is different. The way they got to their Spanish is different. So even if you take a heritage speaker and a second language learner and you give them like the dele or something, and maybe they score the same, their Spanish is not the same. And the way they got to that Spanish is not the same. So just for a couple of examples, I'm going to ask you, which of the two groups, is it heritage speakers or second language learners, who, when they are learning Spanish, they also learn the grammatical terminology. When they learn the pretérito, they're told, esto es un pretérito. When they learn the imperfecto, they're told, esto es un imperfecto. Y el subjuntivo se forma así. Which of the two groups do you think that would be? That is the L2. This doesn't mean that heritage speakers never learn grammatical terminology, but where do we learn grammatical terminology? At school. It's not something, I don't know about you, but when I'm brushing my kids' teeth at night, I don't say, a ver, mijo, el participio pasado del verbo comer. Like, you just don't do that, okay? Right. Which of the two groups, the variety of Spanish that they tend to learn, is what we would consider a prestigious variety, and it's what we would consider a monolingual variety. And I will come back to what I mean by that in a moment. But which of the two groups do you think it is? This is also the L2s. This does not mean that our heritage speakers never learn a prestigious or monolingual variety. But what it does mean is that our heritage speakers typically learn a stigmatized variety and a bilingual variety, which makes their Spanish very, very different. And I'll come back to this. Okay, which of the two groups, when they are learning Spanish, it's typically through literacy activities involving written Spanish. Again, this is the L2. This does not mean that heritage speakers are never exposed to literacy in Spanish, but we're going to see in a moment some data that suggests that it's quite rare. Not rare, it's less common for heritage speakers to be exposed to literacy in Spanish. And finally, do you know what the critical period is? Have you heard this term? Anybody want to offer a nutshell definition of critical period? What is it, more or less?
Isn't it when you're younger, you can obtain native-like intonations and stuff like that, but after, I think it's like 12, you can't?
Well, don't lose hope. You can learn a language after age 12. But basically, there's this window, and there's a lot of stuff we don't know about the black box that is the brain, but there's this window about 8 to 10 where it starts to, right, go down, particularly phonologically and syntactically and things like that. So which of the two groups, typically in this country anyway, begins their study of Spanish after the critical period is bye-bye. SDL2, because by definition, the heritage speakers started learning Spanish when? The heritage speakers. From the time they were born. Actually, have you seen there's data that suggests that some type of language learning happens in the womb? They studied these two groups, French, you can't call them French-speaking babies. Babies born to French-speaking mothers and babies born to German-speaking mothers, right? The intonation of their cries was different. There's only one study that I know that's looked at this. I think more and more people should look at that. So exactly, yeah, because in this country we decided we should start studying foreign languages at age 13. Knowing good and well that we've got this critical period that starting earlier will be better, but no, we wait until 13. So that's the TED Talk. You can go be with my mom and online and looking at the TED Talk if you want to hear more about that. What about oral abilities? Which of the two groups tends to be a lot more fluent orally? This is the heritage speakers. Which of the two tends to have a larger vocabulary, particularly for everyday things, informal things? I should have mixed this up a little more. Which of the two tend to have greater, right? They understand that there's an usted versus a tú cultural norm. This is our heritage speakers, okay? And of course the pronunciation being native-like, although there are some interesting differences. Research is now coming out about phonology among US-raised Spanish speakers and how it differs from that of monolinguals. Note I say differ, it's not wrong, it's just different, okay? Which is to be expected. So these are two very, very different groups. And I promised you I would return to this point, that second language learners learn a variety that's prestigious and monolingual. What makes a variety of language prestigious? Right? There are like, I don't know how many varieties of Spanish we could say in the world. Lots of varieties of English in the world. I think every language has lots of different varieties, okay? What makes one more prestigious than the other? The answer is nothing. Nothing inside the language makes it more prestigious than any other language. What makes it more prestigious is the people who speak it. Van de la mano, el prestigio de la variedad y el prestigio de la gente que lo habla, right? So, and who are the prestigious people in a society? Tends to be people from the upper classes. We tend to privilege urban over rural, don't we? And high levels of formal education. These three things usually tend to travel together. Not always, but a lot of times. Those are the social factors that might cause a variety to have greater prestige. Linguistically, you could say that our prestige varieties don't show recent effects of contact with other languages. And I say recent because all languages have been in contact with other languages, right? I mean, is there such a thing as pure Spanish? Even Paco Veneno will tell you, no, there's no such thing as pure. I mean, isn't Spanish bastardized Latin, Paco? With a little bit of Arabic thrown in, right? Can we talk? So this idea of purity of languages is really pretty nonsensical. So if this is what gives us a prestige variety, or what in society tends to be called prestigious, it's really just the opposite that gives us our stigmatized varieties, okay? Working class folks, rural areas, lower levels of formal education, we tend to say that their ways of speaking do not have prestige, okay? You can add to this, what might you call it? An additional social wrinkle would be that of ethno-racial. I'm not quite sure how to phrase it because there's no such thing as race, but I'm thinking about African-American English, okay? You can be urban, you can have high levels of formal education, and you can be in the upper class and speak African-American English, and still your variety is considered stigmatized, okay? So this isn't a foolproof recipe here. Also, you can have all of these characteristics, right? You can be a wealthy Latino who lives in the city, but if you're Spanish, if you code switch, then your variety of language is considered stigmatized. And I'll come back to what I mean by code switching in a moment. So does this make sense? So no variety in and of itself has the most prestige. I went to a talk on Wednesday about Mars, whether there ever was life on Mars, whether there ever will be life on Mars. And I think if we ever discovered like a community of Martians who speak using language, and we wanted to know what's the most prestigious variety of Martian that there is, you know what we would do? We would get a real estate agent and we would say, take me to the wealthiest neighborhood here on Mars. And we would go around and listen to the way people speak. We would turn on the television. We would go, that's the variety in that neighborhood that would be taught in the schools, and that would be considered prestigious. Does that make sense? So these things absolutely go hand in hand. So here are some examples from Spanish. In the left-hand column, I've got the varieties that would be considered prestigious, or at least non-stigmatized, let's put it that way, okay? Raise your hand if you've ever seen, heard, or even used any of the varieties here in this column, which we would consider, yeah, so everybody has seen these. In Chicago, I see a lot of the Nadian. I don't see the Truje and the Asina. Yeah, do you see them here? See, y'all don't have a lot of Mexicans up here, so I'm not surprised that you don't see this. This tends to be from, this actually was from old Spanish. These are vestiges of old Spanish. You see this a lot in the Southwest, okay? As well as vide. I see a lot of the fuistes, the S on the second person singular preterite, okay? Really, it's just a regularization of a paradigm, isn't it? All the other two forms have S on the end. So they're like, let's put one on the preterite. I don't know if that's the reason. Aiga, super common. So all of these, we could say that there's the source of the stigma of these varieties comes from one of these reasons, okay? Whereas these, where you hear the word felonia, have you heard this word? Yes. Nobody says delito mayor. What's a delito mayor? Oh, you mean a felonia? Oh, okay. Okay. Also, in the United States, aplicamos. Ya no solicitamos. I'm sorry. This is U.S. Spanish, okay? So typically, we talked about these are the reasons why you might see these varieties, whereas these you could be, again, upper class, Latino, bilingual, et cetera, use these varieties, and that would be the reason for the stigma of that variety. So the point being that our heritage speakers will sometimes have some of these traits in their Spanish. Our second language learners, if they learned in a classroom, typically will not. If they studied abroad, they could perhaps acquire some of this. A lot of mine in Chicago, they work in kitchens. They work with a lot of Mexican folks, and then they learn a lot of these. And I'm like, wow, el güero dijo aiga. It's like unbelievable. And that would be the only reason they would acquire that. Okay? So again, there are a lot of different reasons why stigma can be assigned to a language. But I think as teachers of heritage speakers, the number one thing I'd like for you to leave here with today is to be sociolinguistically informed. And what I mean by sociolinguistically informed is to understand where language stigma comes from. Understand that there's nothing inherently wrong with a variety of language. Simply some varieties have prestige and others do not. How do we deal with that in the classroom as teachers? And I'm going to make a proposal to you a little bit later about how I deal with this fact, okay? Right. So those are just some of the linguistic ways in which heritage speakers and L2 learners differ. What about some of the affective ways that they differ, okay? Well, sort of by definition, the heritage speakers have a family connection to their language. This makes teaching heritage learners just such a different endeavor. Those of you who've taught heritage learners, have you then had to like go back and teach second language learners? And did you kind of go, oh man, like shucks, I miss my heritage speaker. There's just, all our students are wonderful, but the heritage speakers, there's just something there. I think because it's a familial connection for them, lo respetan más, respetan a uno más, un poco. No todos son ángeles, de repente hay un diablito por ahí, pero in general, you don't get this like rechazo a veces, especially like on my campus where you have a foreign language requirement, so they're there just to like cumplir con el requisito, and they don't really want to be there. Now, the heritage speakers, I got to say, they have a language requirement too, and if they didn't, they probably wouldn't be there either. But they still approach it from a different, right? When it's in your family, there's just something qualitatively different about it. However, many of these folks have been ridiculed for their variety of Spanish, okay? A lot of them will tell me, about 80% of the heritage speakers in my program are from Mexico. So they'll tell you how they go back, you know, al rancho en Michoacán or wherever during the summers. Y siempre hay un primo que se burla de su forma de hablar. You know, ahí viene el pocho, right? And this one, I'll never forget, this undergrad told me, she was 8 years old and her cousin made so much fun of her that she didn't want to go out of the house anymore. She didn't want to speak Spanish anymore. So they get messages from their own family that their Spanish is substandard, but then they also get messages from the larger society that any language other than English is not welcome here. I don't know if you saw the Coca-Cola commercial during the Super Bowl, not this year, but the year before, because Coke was like, I ain't going there again. They had this wonderful commercial with people singing America the Beautiful in 8 different languages. I encourage you to go and Google this. I think you'll be shocked at the response, this vitriol, this xenophobia. And I don't think it's just like those crazies on the right. I think it was a pretty broad spectrum of otherwise reasonable people who did not like this idea the comments were just, they were mind-blowingly depressing, okay? So this is a country that gives a very strong message that your other languages are not welcome here, okay? So these folks are like, okay, Spanish isn't a good thing to speak here, but even in my own family, they tell me that my variety of Spanish is bad, okay? So it's this, you could call it linguistic self-esteem. Está por el suelo. Okay? So I think we as educators, the last thing we want to be is yet another force con la pluma roja diciéndoles, así no se dice, así no se dice, así no se dice. I think we are in a very powerful position to change the discourse and empower these students to be proud of their language. In fact, when I have the students in my Heritage Speaker program, la verdad, if I had to choose between ahora sí saben dónde poner los palitos y conjugar verbos y hacer esto y lo otro in Spanish, or they can leave with a positive sense of self and their language, I much prefer the positive sense of self and their language so that they want to continue studying it and speaking it and be proud of it, okay? And they are usually the harshest critics of their own Spanish. Now usually, sometimes you'll find one kid who's like, ya lo sé todo, and they usually get a C because they don't study. But you know, particularly if they've made it to college, right? I mean, they've got it going on up here in English, and they're their own worst critics. They realize their Spanish cannot enable them to do what their English can do, okay? So the very first thing I'll hear from a lot of my students is, ay, maestra, mi español es muy malo. Mi español es muy malo. I said, have you seen Spanish 2? Go over to Spanish 2 if you want to hear español malo. Go check that out, you know? So again, what I'd really, really like for them to leave our program with is the idea that mi español es bueno, lo puedo pulir, lo puedo expander, but it's not bad, okay? And so, what about academically? We know that typically our Latino parents in this country have lower levels of formal education, which trickles down in a lot of ways to the children. In my institution, the Heritage Speakers, I think 99.9% of the time are the first people in their families to go to college. So first generation college students. The parents don't know how to support them really at home. Also, the reading, they've got, this is only one study, I hope there are more out there because I'd like to learn more about this. Reading to children appears to be directly correlated to their reading abilities when they grow older, okay? And at least this one study indicated that 40% of Latino children are being read to, okay? 44% of African American children, 64% of white kids. So why might this be the case? Is it because Latino parents don't care and black parents don't? No, of course not. You've got lower levels of literacy sometimes among parents. You've got parents working 2 or 3 jobs, right? Folks who, acquiring a book in the home can be a challenge when you're trying to put food on the table, et cetera. Also, we know that living in poverty can have devastating effects on learning. It's real difficult to pay attention in school if your tooth hurts, if there's domestic violence, if you're homeless, drug issues, et cetera, et cetera. So all of these things, I think, need to be taken into account. It doesn't mean we need to become social workers. But what I am trying to say is that we as teachers need to, this is part of that being sociolinguistically, this is the socio of sociolinguistically informed, understanding where our students are coming from. Because I have seen teachers, no entiendo por qué no, les di un texto de Borges y no entendieron nada. And you're like, really? Borges, was that a good choice? Okay? Dropout rates, of course, are absolutely appalling. We are not doing well by our youth of color. Massachusetts, yeah, no, you're not doing very well either on a national level. In fact, looking at what's happening to our youth of color, some people don't use the word dropout. They use the word push out. They insist that these children are being pushed out of our schools, that this can't just be some innocent thing that happens to them, right? Now, on a more positive note, Maria Carrera and others have proposed that Spanish for Heritage Speakers courses might be able to contribute to closing this achievement gap. It might contribute to getting more kids to graduate from high school. It could contribute to recruitment, getting them into college. And it could contribute to retention, keeping them in college. That is a study waiting to happen to see whether this can help close the education gap. Another study waiting to happen, I discovered this like totally serendipitously. I have a Heritage Speaker Study Abroad program in Oaxaca, Mexico. And the group, not last year, the year before, all 5 of the young women belonged to a Latino sorority. And they helped me see, when they first told me sorority, I had a flashback to my campus and what the sororities were like. It just wasn't my scene, And they said, no, maestra, Latina sororities are real different from white sororities. It's not all about the parties and the matching up with the fraternity boys. It's absolutely 1,000% service-based, community-based. These women were so engaged, like I get chills just remembering it, and I'm convinced that these Latino Greek organizations have a really strong role in not only recruiting these kids to college, but getting them to stay and getting them to graduate. So that, if anybody's looking for a study topic for a dissertation or a master's thesis, there you go. No se lo cobro, se lo regalo. Okay. So I hope to have convinced you, if you weren't already, that not only are heritage speakers, right, very different from our second language learners, but guess what? We have lots of different kinds of apples as well. They are very, very heterogeneous work. It would be a big mistake to assume that they're all similar. We know that some were born in the US, some were born abroad, but isn't it true that someone who comes at the age of 5 is going to look very different from someone who comes at the age of 10? So I'm going to show you 5 profiles here that are sort of composites of people that I've worked with over the years, okay? First you have Marta, que nace en México, llega a los 7 años, viene de un ranchito. Her Spanish does show some non-prestige features like the ones we saw before. Asistió a la escuela de manera intermitente. She did go through a bilingual education program. Why do I use my air quotes? I have the utmost respect for my colleagues in bilingual education, and they're usually the first ones to agree with me that there's nothing bilingual about bilingual education in this country, with some noted exceptions like dual language schools, et cetera. Bilingual education, the goal of bilingual education is to transfer those children to all English classrooms as quickly as possible. There's no goal, implicit or explicit, that they will retain, develop, et cetera, their Chinese, their Haitian Creole, their French, their Japanese, their Spanish. None whatsoever, okay? So esta niña sí cursó un programa de educación bilingüe. She speaks entirely Spanish at home with her parents and 50% with her siblings, okay? Have you ever known a student like Marta? Except for the Mexico part maybe, but yeah? Generally? Okay. Then you have a student like Jose, que nace en Estados Unidos, pero como muchos puertorriqueños, they have like a va y ven, because they're citizens, they can come and go. You have the cyclical migration. Entonces este niño vivió un par de años en Puerto Rico. He did not go through any bilingual ed program. He speaks, you know, sometimes Spanish, sometimes English with his parents, and he speaks entirely in English with his siblings, okay? So who's going to have a stronger level of Spanish? Oops, what did I just do? I clicked on something that I shouldn't have. Who's going to have a higher level of Spanish? Is it going to be Jose, or is it going to be Marta? It's going to be I might need help here. Go away. Okay. So Marta, you say? Marta, yeah, Marta's going to have a much stronger level of Spanish. She arrived at an older age, and she did some schooling in Mexico. Okay. Yet they're both heritage speakers, right? What do you do if you have them both in the same classroom? I hope you're not looking to me for the answer, because I don't have it. No, I'm not. I have some ideas, but this is a challenge. Then you have a kid like Roberto, que nace en Argentina, llegó a los 12 años, regular schooling, middle-class family. His parents went to high school. Everybody would say that the variety of Spanish that Roberto speaks is prestigious, okay? Actually, I was telling you guys yesterday, I think I need to change this. Typically, when someone comes at 12, we call them native speakers, okay? If you've ever talked to a 12-year-old, you know that they are not adults, right? But linguistically, I think there's a consensus that they have pretty much converged entirely on the Spanish of their communities, with a couple of exceptions. So when someone comes at 12, they're typically considered native speakers of that language. And I keep using my air quotes. All of these terms are very, very contested, okay? So maybe let's change him to 10 or 11. Now you might say, 11, really? So the day he turns 12, he's a linguistic adult and he's converged, and the day before? No, obviously not. But we have to draw these lines somewhere to talk about these general phenomena, okay? So let's say he comes at 11, all right? He's going to have much stronger Spanish than Jose, than Luis, y también Marta, okay? But all 3 of these folks would be considered heritage speakers of Spanish, okay? Then you have Carolina. I don't see a lot of Carolinas on my campus, but I know I will soon. Carolina is what we call sociolinguistically the 3rd generation. She's born in the US, and so are her parents, okay? Her grandparents are from Honduras. She speaks entirely English at home, but abuela lives in the house, and they watch novelas together, right? Y la abuela le habla en español, y ella contesta en inglés, right? So she understands everything abuela says. Abuela, I don't know if abuela understands what Carolina says back to her. I don't know. But she is also a heritage speaker, right? Speaker, she's a heritage student, right? But she's certainly going to look really, really different from Roberto, right? Now, the kid I see most in Chicago is a kid like Jose. This is a kid who's born in the US to adult immigrant parents, or his parents brought him before the age of 6. Because what happens at the age of 5 or 6 here in the US? You start school. So all of Jose's schooling has been in the United States. He speaks entirely Spanish with his parents, although this actually can vary. If Jose is the first kid, he'll probably speak a lot of Spanish with his parents because his parents don't know any English. If Jose is the second kid, or the third kid, or the fourth kid, Jose's then got older siblings who are talking to him in English, and his parents, entre más tiempo llevan acá, más inglés aprenden, right? Because a first kid who speaks to the parent in English, the parent's like, no te entiendo, right? But the third, fourth, fifth kid, the parent, right? Ya se cansan y bueno. Code switches uses a mix. Actually, a lot of times, this kind of kid will use 100% English with his siblings, okay? Now, what's remarkable about Jose is that this kid showed up to school monolingual in Spanish, or very close to monolingual, very, very dominant in Spanish, okay? By the time this kid's in 3rd or 4th grade, his English has taken over his Spanish. And I think this is a really important point to underscore, because it's a good response to folks who run around yelling, why aren't immigrants learning English? Where are they looking? That's what I'd like to know. Because everywhere I look, I see young people who are learning English very quickly and losing their heritage languages. They must be looking at, las abuelas que llegan, fine, a 60-year-old lady came here, she didn't learn anything. Okay, that could happen. Have you ever tried learning a language when you're 60? And you go, I don't know. I'm just saying. That strikes me as a much different reality than what we really see here in this country. In fact, immigrants are learning English at a much faster rate than in the past, and there's a lot of data that show that this is the case, okay? So all of these kids are heritage speakers, right? Actually, when Jose has kids and they grow up, they are Carolinas, right? So I know good and well that 80% of my heritage speaker program now is of Jose and Marta, okay? Very occasionally will I have a kid like Luis. He's got to be a really good student and really interested in studying Spanish to do well in the program. Roberto, I would tend to pass out of my heritage speaker program, and he will tend to go to the major and minor level of Spanish. Carolina, I can't help in my program. She is a heritage speaker. But the critical mass in my program is designed for Jose's. That's who the program is for. So a kid like Carolina is just not going to do well in this program. So unfortunately, I need to send her to the basic language program and just kind of cross my fingers and hope that they treat her well and that they can help her with what her different needs are, okay? So this is part of the messy reality of working with heritage speakers. In a way, I'm kind of, I don't know if I want to call it lucky. I do have, like I said, my critical mass, 80% of my students look like this. So it could be said that I have a pretty homogenous group dentro de lo que cabe. I have a pretty homogenous group. I have colleagues in Miami and in the Southwest who have all these kids and then some, as far as their differing abilities, okay? Now that's what we can talk about during the question and answer session. If some of you have that kind of mixture, what can you do? So to summarize, until now, heritage speakers and second language learners are very different from each other linguistically, affectively, and academically. But heritage speakers are often a very heterogeneous group in and of themselves. So that's the first part of the talk. Now we move on to the second part of the talk. What I call pedagogical and perhaps philosophical approaches when you've got a lot of these folks on your campus. You have basically, in general, 2 options when you've got a lot of these heritage speakers. And here I'm speaking about the beginning level, Spanish 1, Spanish 2, Spanish 3, Spanish 4. How many people where you teach have a language requirement, foreign language requirement? Yeah? Okay. Is it number of semesters or level of semester? Level. Okay. Ours, for example, is 4th semester Spanish. Or 4th semester language. What about on your campuses? 3rd semester? 3rd semester, 4th semester? Okay. And when they complete that language requirement, they never have to take Spanish again, right? Okay. So I'm going to divide this into those what I'll call beginning language courses. And then anything beyond the requirement, I'm going to call advanced language courses. Okay. Those are the courses that count for your minor and for your major. Okay. Some campuses separate the apples and the oranges at these introductory levels, okay? They do come together again at the advanced coursework. I have never met a campus who says, oh, no, we keep them separate the entire major. I don't think anybody would advocate for that. It doesn't make a lot of sense. On my campus, we have them separated for the first 4 semesters. They come together for a 5th semester for grammar. Well, that's a fun class. Grammar. They separate one more time for composition, okay? And that happened because I had to teach the class once. And I said, this doesn't work. So we separate them one more time, and then they come together for everything else. Is that clear? Okay. So this is what we do, this is what a lot of campuses do. Some campuses, however, mix the two types of students from the very beginning. They have the heritage speakers in Spanish 1, in Spanish 2, in Spanish 3, okay? Now, if it's a student like Carolina, in my case, I really can't put her in the heritage. Remember Carolina? She would not do well in a class full of Jose's. She's going to feel intimidated. She's not going to feel empowered, okay? So in that case, okay, if you've got a Carolina mixed in with your oranges, maybe that's what you need to do. But if you've got a critical mass of Carolinas, then you need to consider creating something to separate them out. If you do have a separate course, how many of you have a separate course for heritage speakers? Okay, you have separate courses. Are your heritage speakers allowed, permitted, to take the basic language courses? And what I mean by basic, so I'm dividing it between heritage and basic second language. Does that make sense? Anglo, yes, the second language learner courses.
Well, we just put 2 courses. I teach at Grand Canyon Line, and we just got 2 courses in the catalog this year. One for the sort of academically rigorous student, and one for the ones that have more. So we divided up whatever one was the oranges of the heritage speakers classes to sort of design 2 courses, and that one course we eventually go into. The reality is we only have so many courses we can offer the students,
Yeah.
so they have to go with the requirements. So hopefully at the end of course A, they can go in mainstream into some of these other Anglo-based courses and finish the requirements, and then the heritage students as scholars will hopefully go on to take an AP exam, whether it's literature, or you can go on to extension.
Right, I see.
Okay. I think my question, yours is very specific. My question is a little more general. If you've got at your Spanish 1, 2, 3, 4 levels, if you've got the heritage track, digamos, and then the second language track, if you've got these on the books and you've got a program running, can your heritage speakers still defy the fact that you've got a heritage program and enroll in the L2 classes if they want to? One person saying no.
But after, right? After the courses, they cannot go take them. They cannot go back. They have to move forward to
No, of
the more
course,
advanced
yeah.
classes, and they can.
No, but I mean, okay, Spanish 1, 2, 3, 4. For güeros, pues, digamos, L2. So you don't permit the heritage speakers to take those L2 classes.
Well, it's not that I don't permit, but they are so advanced. My heritage speakers.
Right.
So it's a very different
You
scenario.
mean by choice?
By choice. What I'm saying is even though your heritage speakers are advanced, I've seen plenty of campuses where we have a heritage speaker program over here, pero fulanito didn't want to take it. He wants to take Spanish 3 y lo dejamos.
If they want to, but they will try to recommend this other track. But so far, we don't implement any rule that, no, you can't enroll in those other courses. So far, but we'll see.
See, we do. We do at UIC. I have the power to drop heritage speakers from the L2 program. And in 10 years, I've used this power exactly 0 times. And I'll explain to you a little bit why, what we do with our placement that I like to think makes the students comfortable and feel that they're in the appropriate spot, okay? It is my opinion that heritage speakers should not, if they have, and I'm not saying all heritage speakers, I'm not saying, oh, you're Carolina, you need to be in Patowski's heritage speaker program. No, that's not what I'm saying. I should really revise this. If you've got the level of proficiency for which the heritage speaker program is designed, if you're a good match for it, that's where you go. You don't go to the L2 class, period. I like you, you're a nice kid. You're not a language acquisition expert. You're not a Spanish language scholar. I'm going to make that decision for you, okay? And the reasoning is somewhat similar to that English example that I gave you earlier, right? When I showed up to college, for example, I had to take English, right? I mean, doesn't every college campus in this country have an English requirement, even though you grew up in the United States speaking English, right? Okay. When I showed up to my college campus, I could not have told my academic advisor, yeah, so I want to fulfill my English language requirement in the ESL sections, because they have those, right, on a lot of campuses for folks who need additional English support. And they would have told me, yeah, no, you can't take the ESL. What if I said, oh, but I really want to? Or I don't feel confident in my English. Or in the back of my head, I think, I'm going to get an easy A in the ESL section, right? They would say, yeah, no, sorry, mija, you've got to take the class that we have for you, okay? So that metaphor, it's not perfect, it doesn't extend perfectly, but I think it's a useful one to help get administrators to understand, right? We don't let speakers with strong Spanish proficiency take SSL classes, Spanish as a second language classes, like ESL, SSL, right, to fulfill their language requirements, right? If we've got the heritage speaker class, I'm sorry, that's where they need to go, okay? Now the reason, wait, before I get to the reality, this is where we're at now. My dean asked me, how do you separate heritage speakers from second language learners? How are you doing this? And what we used to do up until about 4 years ago was they went to a website and answered a bunch of questions. Did you learn Spanish in a non-academic context? Okay? It's not, you know, where's your mama from? It's not, we're not trying to get to that level. I had some students who were returned Mormon missionaries who had spent time in Argentina, for example. Their linguistic profile was that of a heritage speaker. It really was. Completely informal learning. I had another gal who had a nanny, a Guatemalan nanny. Right? She was this white gal who had a Guatemalan nanny, and her Spanish looked like that of a heritage speaker. These folks linguistically are heritage speakers. They should be with the apples. Okay? So it was through this self-identification that I used to separate them. My dean was really nervous about that and concerned that there could be lawsuits. You know, I'm being discriminated against. This is ethnic profiling. I said, no, it's not ethnic. And I gave him the two examples I just told you. That's not what it's about. It's linguistic profiling. And he said, okay, linguistic profiling is completely above board and fair, and I get it. I will support you on that. But you've got to separate them using purely linguistic means then. Yesterday we talked at length about what the process I went through. Finally, I came up with 20 items of informal vocabulary, multiple choice test. My heritage speakers, get them all right. My second language folks, even if they're like 4th, 5th semester, they get them all wrong. Well, they're guessing. They get 30% of them right. Right? So questions like, a ver, un ejemplo de ayer. No le cuentes nada a mi tía porque es muy A, gorda, B, chismosa, C, enojona, I don't remember, something, right? So chismosa is the right answer. Even my really highly proficient, you know, 4th, 5th semester second language students, they get that at chance. They're guessing. And even my Carolinas, because she's watching novelas with abuela, she understands chismosa, and she gets that right. So once I was able to prove to the dean with, I think, 4,000 students or something of data over 4 semesters, that this was a really reliable and valid way to separate the two, that's when he gave me the green light. He says, you can drop the heritage speakers from the L2 program. So what we do, if the basic language, and we have it's 2,000 students, it's big. If the instructors sense, ooh, fulano might be a heritage speaker, okay, they give him a note that I've prepared. It's really nice. Isn't it nice? It's a nice note. It's very friendly. And it says, your instructor thinks you might be a heritage speaker. You need to go talk to Patowski. She's a nice lady. She'll help you out. P.S. If you don't go, she's going to drop you, kind of thing. So there's the carrot, and then there's the stick, right? So they come to the office. They're often really nervous, pobrecitos. They're like, no, mi español es malo, that whole thing. And I say, look, this program, I talk to them a little bit. If I see they're like Carolinas, I say, you know what? Go back, vaya con Dios, right? But if I see they're like a Jose or like a Marta, I say, you know what? Here's the book. Go to class a tal hora en tal lugar mañana, a ver qué dices, and we'll talk about it, giving them some agency, or I guess it's pretend agency. I don't know. But they always come back and say, no, pues sí, tenía usted razón. Everybody here is born in Chicago like me. This is going to work. This is great. I haven't yet had a kid say, no, I refuse. And if that happens, I'll report back and let you know if I have to use my secret power. But I've never had to use it. And like I said, I think it's because we do it well, and we dialogue with these kids, and we try to place them properly. Not because your last name is Jimenez, right? That's not how it works, okay? So this is what I argue. If they give you the dang program, use it, and don't let the kids go. Don't let them make the decisions of where they need to go, okay? The reality, however, is that many campuses don't have my dean, who gave this superpower, okay? So you've got these mixed classes. Now, if you're familiar with the work of Melissa Bowles out of Urbana-Champaign, she's doing some interesting work showing how this can be beneficial. You can make this work. What I've seen, however, is the following. The second language students are intimidated. Right? You're going to be intimidated if you've got Jose in your Spanish 2 class. And he's like, órale, maestro, lo que me parece es que... You're going to be like, what? That's not fair. Why is he here? You know, this isn't a good thing. But then guess what? The heritage speakers are intimidated by the L2 students when they know how to fill in the blank with the correct form of the pasado perfecto del subjuntivo. Right? And then they're like, órale, el güero got an A and I got a C. My Spanish is worse than I thought. Right? That linguistic self-esteem again, that easy A that some of them maybe thought they were going to get does not materialize. Has anybody ever taught a mixed class? So this is us. This is the instructors teaching the mixed class. Okay? Te vuelves loco. It's very, very challenging to work with this type of mixture. Okay? So how do you make the best of a mixed class? If you don't have a heritage speaker class, right, to put them in, or if you do have one to put them in, but you've got to accept them in the regular because you don't have the superpower to get them out, okay? There's just a couple of little, I have no magic bullet for you. I'm just going to throw out a couple of ideas. Assess what they know and what they don't know. Don't assume grammatical knowledge. I've seen teachers actually assume that a kid like Jose is going to know what the subjuntivo is. I can tell you right now, they use the subjuntivo all the time. They just don't know it's called the subjuntivo. And when you tell them, okay, to form the subjuntivo, you take the infinitive, take off the ending, and put on the opposite vowel. What's an infinitive? What's an ending? And what in God's name is an opposite vowel? They do not know. So you've got to go through the side door. You've got to say, put ojalá in front of it. Si te suena bien es el subjuntivo. And then agarran confianza, and they're like, okay, I can identify the subjuntivo, and then you work from there. Right? So you've got to kind of work with what they know. L2 explanations for second language learners are not going to work. Por lo que vimos antes, the path to acquisition has been completely different. Okay? I did this experiment with my brother. I gave him an ESL book. Granted, it was like an old, not the more modern communicative types of books, but it had these grammar exercises. My brother's a native, educated speaker of English. He was like, the past participle of the verb to light? Yeah, I don't know what that is. Right? Native, educated speaker. Right? So this is the reason why our heritage speakers often do not do well in second language classes. Okay? Also, I had a couple of students in a study that I did say, God, I hated being in that class because every time something came up, the teacher would say, ¿Y tú, José, en tu familia, cómo se celebra el Día de Muertos? ¿Y tu abuela también mata gallinas? Y he said, I don't want to be your poster child. Leave me alone. Okay, so we have to be sensitive to it. Some students, on the other hand, are like, en mi casa se hace esto, right? But we have to really assess that appropriately, okay? I've had teachers also say, no me quites a mis heritage, me encantan, porque se ríen a mis chistes y ayudan a los güeritos, right? And I think to myself, okay, that can be empowering, right? If the heritage speaker feels, right, that they're helping this other kid, boy, I thought my Spanish was, this kid can't really speak it, I'm going to help him. But that's not why our students came to college, to be unpaid tutors for second language learners, okay? And this is where Melissa Bull's work, I think, comes in hand. You've got to be sure that helping is going both ways, that the second language learners are helping the heritage speakers with the areas in which they need help, and then vice versa. Does that make sense? So it's not a disaster, but it takes a lot of work. And this work, Maria Carrera pioneered. She had a child, I guess, who was put in a gifted program, and then she started reading about gifted issues and what's called differentiated instruction. And then the light went on, and she said, this should be applied to heritage speakers as well. So she's really led the field in the application of Tomlinson's work to differentiated instruction. There's no way I can do justice to this field in such a short time. It's not, you're doing better, so I give you 10 questions, and I give you 5 questions. It's right? You're really, really differentiating the content and the assessment. In resumidas cuentas, it's a lot more work for you. As an instructor, it's a lot more work to differentiate instruction. It's not everybody uses the same exact size uniform, pero el tuyo I'll take in a little bit here, or for you I'll let out a little bit over there. It's got to be much more well thought out than that. Actually, I should mention here, I'm going to mention at the end, a video that's really good to help you understand differentiated instruction. Somebody mentioned before the cost of creating a heritage speaker class. I've been on campuses that tell me, for example, let's say this is Spanish 2, okay? Second language learners, Spanish 2. There's 12 sections. The dean has budgeted us for 12 sections, that's it. You can't do any more. And then they say, well, we don't have a critical mass. I can't create another section for heritage speakers. And I say, well, fíjate, Over here, you've got 2 heritage speakers. Aquí tienes 3, aquí no tienes ninguno, aquí hay 2, aquí hay uno. When you count them up, you actually have enough to create one section. So one of these, you see what I'm saying? One of these can be designated the heritage speaker section, right? So if you look carefully, you may find that you do have a critical mass. Now, they may be very varied. They're not maybe all going to be like Jose's. If they are, you're super lucky. You might have a couple of Martas, a couple of Carolinas, but you might have that critical mass. And my argument is, it's better to do that, to separate your apples out from your oranges, than to have them all spread out all over the place, okay? Now, I've seen this happen, actually, this happened at Urbana. The heritage speakers got irritated, and rightfully so, because they said, you know what, if I took the L2 class, I have 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, and now you're telling me I have to take the 11 o'clock. That's my only option, okay? I get that, and that's a really fair argument. But I'm going to come back to a couple. Well, actually, maybe I should just do it now. Can't remember if it's in the other slide or not. There's a couple things you can do to help offset that inconvenience, okay? One of them would be help them see that they're going to fulfill their language requirement much more quickly, right? If you make that class have either more credit or different credit, that's one way that it can do it. Another way would be to make this section, if these sections all meet 4 times a week, make this section meet 3 times a week with an online component perhaps, right? Because the truth is they don't need, the reason these people meet face-to-face so frequently is because they need that face-to-face to develop, right, oral communicative competence. These kids have, for the most part, very, very strong oral communicative competence, don't they? So they don't need perhaps those full 4 hours. Give them less. How about this? What if you gave them retroactive credit? What if you told them, get a B or higher in this? And I know you had to mess with your schedule because there's only 11 o'clock. If you get a B or higher, you'll get 3 or 4 credits or whatever for the level before it, right? We do this. A lot of college campuses do this. It's completely legit. It's a way of rewarding them for prior knowledge. So there's a number of carrots you can give to the students to get them to come over and not feel singled out or not feel put upon by the scheduling challenges, right? So as I mentioned earlier, if you're able to separate your heritage speakers from second language learners based on purely linguistic criteria, that's fantastic. Some places they don't need to put the bar this high. They can just ask the students. Of course, I have a program with 200 heritage speakers per semester. I could probably do 250 if my dean gave me more sections. So I can't sit down and talk to all these people, right? I have to do this with an online placement procedure. You might be able to speak with your students and figure it out. This lessens the burden on the instructors. Oh, and yeah, this is what I just talked about. Okay, great. So now you've got your program, you've got your students there, you've taken them out of the L2 programs. What do you teach them? That's the last part of his talk. You got them there. What do you do now? Okay? Some teachers think they know the answer, like off the bat. I know what I need to do. Get rid of their terrible Spanish, right? The Spanish they speak is awful. I need to teach them standard Spanish, okay? And this, I'm going to come back to being sociolinguistically informed, okay? When we look at what sociolinguists tell us, I did it again. The concept of a single standard has been pretty widely rejected. We have quotes from Hidalgo in the Southwest, from Alberto Escobar, the Peruvian linguist, right? It's this abstract concept that nobody really speaks, okay? So this idea that their Spanish is somehow non-standard, right? Because the opposite of standard would be non-standard, substandard, right? You know. I think it makes more sense to look at things in terms of where different varieties should be used in what different contexts. I think we can all agree that Spanish spelling is standardized, more so than English. Have you ever noticed, like, the Brits and the Australians are always putting S's where we put Z's, and they put U's in these weird places, right? So spelling in Spanish is lápiz is spelled lápiz the same way everywhere as far as I know, okay? But everything else varies. The lexicon varies, woof. You've all seen the video, Qué difícil es hablar el español. If you haven't, look it up. It's really, really, really funny. Qué difícil es hablar el español. Son 2 hermanos que tocan la guitarra y van cantando una historia de cómo viajaron por el mundo y se sentían así muy, like, you know, oh, my Spanish is great. Y van a otro, porque lo aprendieron en tal lugar. Y van a otro lugar, right? Y ofenden a todo el mundo y nadie les entiende porque las palabras son diferentes, right? It's really, really, really well done. And it's going to be in your head all day long, right? It's really, really catchy. Okay? So we know lexicon varies. Morphosyntax, a little bit. It can vary. We have the use of vos in some countries. P.S. Why is vos never in the textbooks? Never in textbooks. Would you say there are more people on this planet who use vos than the 36 million who use vosotros in Spain? In Spain, the vosotros is used by a large majority of the population. And there's, 36 million people in Spain, okay? My understanding is that vos is used by some 80 million people across Latin America. And vosotros is always in the textbooks. And vos is never in the textbooks.
Well, the editorials won't allow you to do that, the publishers.
The publishers, right?
And the reviewers would strongly say no, which is shocking.
I'm not against putting vosotros, I think that should be in the books, so that students can see it and learn about it, but why not the vos as well? I get that vos is used differently in different countries. There's different kinds of vos. But wouldn't it be better to commit the sin of showing one kind of vos than not showing any? Like pretending it doesn't exist? Sorry, getting off that. That's not what I'm here to talk about. Morphosyntactical variation, right? So you have some countries that say que tú quieres instead of que quieres, right? That kind of variation it exists. So my point being that Spanish is different all over the place. And then you have, of course, U.S. Spanish, right? Did you know that the United States, of all the countries that speak Spanish in the world, okay, if you look at los conteos oficiales, we would be number 5. But if you add in the close to 12 million undocumented folks who don't report on the census, okay, we're number 2. No, we're number 3. We're number 3. Then if you add the 2.8 million people like me who are not Latino but who speak Spanish at home, we are number 2. Only Mexico has more Spanish speakers than this country, okay? So at some point we need to say our ways of speaking Spanish are completely valid. Well, we should say it anyway. But we've got the numerical force to say, you know what? We don't need this external norm imposed on us, right? I mean, when I was growing up on Long Island, nobody ever said to me, Kim, you cannot call this thing here an elevator anymore. Because in England, they call it a lift. And you want the British to understand you, don't you? Nobody ever said that to me. Nobody ever said, you can't call this the trunk of a car. Because in England, they call it a boot. And you want the English to understand you, don't you? Why do we always tell our Spanish speakers here in this country, no puedes decir aplicar para un trabajo, porque en México dicen solicitar? At what point do we say, you know what? This is how we say it here. Si me voy a México, aprenderé a decir solicitar. Pero la gran mayoría de nuestros estudiantes van a quedarse acá, trabajando acá, con hispanohablantes de acá. So you know what? Step off. Like, let us speak our Spanish, right?
Did you know that on the Apple, the iPhone, the Siri, they have Mexican Spanish, Spain Spanish, and U.S. Spanish?
I love that.
So they have all.
Does she code switch in U.S.
Yeah. It's funny if you check it out. They.
A ver, nuestra tarea va a ser esa. We gotta put Siri in U.S. Spanish and see what happens.
Sobre aplicar, last summer I was talking to my best friend. She's doing some translation work, and she said, I'm translating some essays for a student que está aplicando a una universidad. And I said, what do you mean aplicando? Didn't we used to say solicitar? And she said, no, I know, but now everybody's saying aplicar.
In Mexico?
In Mexico.
Wow.
So it's a very interesting.
All right.
So I'm sure that is changing.
Right.
So this, I think, is one of the more complicated parts of our job as Spanish language educators, is figuring out what's a regionalism, what's formal versus informal, et cetera. So instead of correct, incorrect, this is a metaphor that I like to use. Se lo robé a Ana Celia Centella, por cierto. Y una vez le confesé, I stole your beach wedding thing. She's like, ay, mija, yo se lo robé a otra persona, así que úsalo todo lo que quieras, right? So it goes like this. When you go to a beach, and it's not a nude beach, what kind of clothing do we wear? It's not a trick question. What do you wear to the beach? A bathing suit, right? Y en los pies, las chanclas, okay? O una camiseta. So if you were Justin Timberlake, I'm just saying if you were Justin Timberlake, you might go like this to the beach, right? Okay. Now, what if that evening Mr. Timberlake needs to go to a wedding? And this wedding appears to be taking place in a very formal location. It looks like a temple or a church or something like that, okay? what would Mr. Timberlake wear that evening to the wedding? A suit? I thought this was a suit. What kind of suit? A different kind of suit. A suit like the one that you're wearing right there, right? So, un traje de vestir, maybe he'd go like this, right? Con corbata. Would he wear his chanclas? No, se pondría zapatos de vestir, okay? What would happen if Mr. Timberlake decided to go to this event vestido así? ¿Qué diría la gente? Bueno, aparte de, right? ¿Qué diría la gente? Pero qué descarado, ¿qué le pasa a este tío? ¿Cómo se atreve? ¿En qué cabeza cabe acudir a este lugar vestido así? Está vestido de manera completamente inapropiada. All right? Del mismo modo, if Mr. Timberlake decides to go here dressed like this, and it's not a beach wedding, ¿qué va a decir la gente? Pero está loco este tío. Se está asando. ¿Qué le pasa? Está vestido de manera completamente inapropiada. Okay, now here's the crux of the argument. Can you say that a bathing suit is incorrect? Can an article of clothing be inherently incorrect? No. It can only be what? Inappropriate for a particular context. You see where I'm going with this? I've seen a lot of ugly ties in my day, but you cannot say that a tie is incorrect. Okay? Any natural language use that a community uses cannot be incorrect. It just cannot be incorrect. Steven Pinker talks about this with the taxi cab maxim. I love this taxi cab. Have you heard the taxi cab maxim? It's really neat. It's kind of, I think it works. So if you're driving a taxi, right, anywhere on the planet, you cannot violate the laws of physics. I mean, right, even Homer Simpson knows. You can't, he said to Lisa once, in this house we obey the laws of thermodynamics, Lisa. So it's impossible, as far as we know, to violate the laws of physics on this planet as we know it today, okay? If you're driving a taxi cab. Now, you can violate the traffic laws of the state of Massachusetts, right? You can, I don't know, can you make rights on red here? Yeah, okay, so forget that. New York City, you can't make a right on red. So you can be from Massachusetts and go to New York City, make a right on red. You've just violated the laws of New York City, but have you violated the laws of physics? No, that's not possible, okay? So everybody's grammar, right, is like their taxi cab. And if you acquired that grammar in a naturalistic context, I don't care if it's aiga, I don't care if it's fuistes, I don't, any number of things. No one has the right to say that that is wrong. You're wrong if you say that's wrong, because you cannot violate the laws of physics, okay? So in this metaphor, we cannot say that a bathing suit is incorrect. So what tends to happen, you could say, many of our heritage speakers show up to our classrooms, which we like to consider as formal environments, right? They show up in bathing suits. They have beach Spanish, we could say. Now, as educators, we have several ways that we can respond to that. We can see Jose show up in his bathing suit. We can see him write fuistes in an essay. And we can say, guácala, quítate eso, no lo quiero volver a ver nunca en la vida, qué horror, ¿cómo te atreves? Tu español es terrible. Shame him, right? Tell him something that's not accurate. Tell him that his usage was incorrect, okay? And these kinds of criticisms can lead young people to want to abandon Spanish altogether, okay? Another approach would be to say, you know what? I'm sociolinguistically informed. I understand. Why would I expect him to know that aiga and fuistes and these other types of uses are considered inappropriate for these kinds of contexts? He knows it in English. Why would I expect him to know it in Spanish? So instead, what you can do is say, okay, Jose, esa es una manera de decirlo. Te voy a enseñar otra manera de decirlo. Does that make sense? So you might ask yourself, why does Jose's Spanish closet look like this? It's only got bathing suits in it. But his English closet looks like this. Look at how much formal and informal clothing he has. Well, look at where he was raised. He was raised in the United States. Every time he's had to go to a wedding, a formal communicative event, he has done so in English. So that's what he has in his closet. As educators, I think our job is to take our students to Macy's, right? Not literally, but take them to Macy's, put on a shirt, help them learn cómo vestirse de manera formal. Okay, now they're going to get it wrong at first. They won't tuck their shirt in, the shoes are on the wrong feet, the tie is on the head, whatever. They're not going to get it right. But doesn't it take a long time to develop this, right? So I think that's a more additive and much more valuable way of approaching this. Right. Also, you don't want to tell him, take off that bathing suit and burn it. He's going to need that every time he goes to the beach. Right? So what you're doing is adding on to what they already have. Okay? Another thing, though, I think is very important. I don't think it's enough to say, this use is appropriate here, but it's inappropriate there. You've got to unpack that why. Why is it inappropriate here? Who decides? Right? Who are the gatekeepers? Who is it that says que no puedes decirlo de esta forma en este contexto? Right? Number one, who decides? Number two, that changes over time. Right? So you're basically taking your sociolinguistic informedness and you're passing it on to your students. So that way, les amplías el vestuario para que ellos puedan tomar la decisión. You're empowering them to make the decision. Si quieren llegar a la boda en una guayabera o en un traje de baño, en lo que sea, they can do that, but they're empowered to make that decision themselves. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's what I think is a much better approach. So instead of talking about correct and incorrect, talk about formal and informal, which again, they get this. They know that you can't write ain't or cuz in a dictionary, not because either of these is incorrect, but because they're not appropriate for formal written contexts. Okay? I think the bottom line is respect. Respect what our students bring to the classroom. You know, they're not naked at least, right? They got something on. Our L2 students show up, you know, naked. Right? So they will need that bathing suit during their lifetimes, okay? Here's the famous Aplica. I mean, if this is what they're seeing, this is a Chicago newspaper, okay? If this is what they're seeing, if this is what's happening, you know, that's what they're going to be using, okay? And here's another one. Sometimes I see taxas with an A. Yes. Yeah? Here we have taxes, okay? So I think this is one of the hardest questions that we face, deciding what's okay at the wedding. We're kind of acting as gatekeepers, aren't we? Okay? Norms are changing all the time. Last night in the hotel, I watched Mad Men. And so ladies used to wear gloves when they went out, right? So don't fashion norms change over time? Well, so do language forms. I mean, if you look at a newspaper from the 30s, wow, look at the New York Times from the 30s. Language is different back then, okay? The way what's acceptable at the wedding, we could say, is different at different times. I don't have, again, there's no list that's handed down from up on high that says, esto se puede llevar en la boda y esto no, okay? But I think we do need to locally ground these ideas. If you're going to write for La Raza, which we just saw, the Aplica and Taxas, okay? If that's the kind of exercises you're having your student do, write an article that you could submit to La Raza, maybe then it's okay for Aplica to be there. But if your exercise is send it to El Clarín de Argentina, then you've got to conform to how they dress for weddings in Argentina. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So once again, this goes back to what I said before about if you want to have them work on these external norms, I mean, I think it's a valid pedagogical exercise, but not as a general approach to teaching language. We've got to be sociolinguistically informed and realize that U.S. Spanish has its place. In fact, you probably know, what was it, en el 2012, la Real Academia, en su diccionario, right? Have you ever looked up a word in the diccionario de la Real Academia and it will put like una palabra and it'll put Mex in parentheses. That means it's from Mexico. Or they'll put ERG, ARG, and that means it's from Argentina, right? There's a new one now, Estados Unidos. Desde el 2012 existe el estadounidismo en el diccionario de la Real Academia. This is a very positive development, okay? Nos da nuestro lugar en el mundo hispanohablante, okay? So, if you have a separate program or coursework, this is back to the topic of what do I do? Now that I have them here, what do I do, okay? What do they already know? That's your first step. Figure out qué pueden hacer, right? Hay cosas que pueden hacer, hay cosas que no hacen tan bien. De las cosas que no hacen tan bien, and there's probably a lot of them, pick the ones that you think are most important. Now, other people in your department who are helping you design your program, you might have really different opinions. You might have somebody in your department who says, I want que puedan identificar un pretérito y un imperfecto y decirme los usos de cada uno. Es cierto, no saben hacerlo. Si tú piensas que es una meta válida, then that's what you'll teach them, okay? You can probably sense that's not what we do in my program. Of all the things, there are lots of things that heritage speakers can't do in their heritage language. There's lots of things I can't do in English, right? I mean, there's going to be a list. Choose those goals carefully and in a sociolinguistically informed fashion, okay? In L2 courses, this is pretty unproblematic. I mean, don't you think Spanish 2 looks the same here in Boston as it does in Chicago, as it does in China, as it does on Mars? I mean, L2, maybe you put the subjuntivo in chapter 5 and you put it in chapter 4, or whatever, you know. But for the most part, it's pretty unproblematic, the way L2 classes are taught. And as we know, the sequence of structures that are taught, is it based in SLA research? No, it's not. That's a discussion for a separate day to have with the publishers, right? But we know that heritage language learners are very, very heterogeneous. And what I would argue for is to use language arts much more than L2. We all know about L2. We went to college. We studied second language acquisition. Some of us studied with, with Jim Lee, Bill Van Patten. We think, yeah, we studied with really, really smart people, and we learned a lot about second language acquisition. We did not learn about how to teach language arts. And this is the piece that I think is really missing from heritage language teaching. Now, this doesn't mean that I go to Mexico, I take a book that's used with Mexicanos to study language arts, to study el español in Mexico, and then we throw it at our heritage speakers. No, they need more linguistic support. So a kid like Jose, and probably Roberto, you can use 80% language arts and 20% the kind of L2-ish linguistic support that they might need. A kid like Carolina, right? She might need 50% language support that looks similar to L2-ish stuff, and then the other 50% language arts. What I'm arguing for is using as much language arts approach as possible. And what do I mean by language arts approach? Reading and writing. And writing and reading, and then reading some more, and then writing some more. That's what I think is most beneficial for these students. To conclude with a few curricular ideas, we're going to take our break and then talk about your questions and thoughts. Just a few ideas to throw out, to answer this question. What do I teach them? What should I do? Here's an idea. Teach them about language contact. I have a unit in Spanish about language contact, okay? What some people call Spanglish, which is a term I don't like. I'll talk about that in a second. It is composed of, you can cut this cake in different ways, but code switching, borrowing, extensions, and calcs. I teach students this. I teach students how to differentiate between them, para que la próxima vez que vayan a México y el primo ahí se burla de ellos, right? They can answer. Acabo de emplear un cambio de códigos intraoracional seguido por un préstamo lingüístico, right? And P.S., there are people who earn a good living studying the way I speak, right? It's got lots of value, right? Again, passing on our sociolinguistic informedness to our students. Why not? Why should we have all the goodies, all the knowledge, right? Pass it on to them. I told you I was going to mention this term. A lot of people use the term Spanglish. I would like to encourage folks to use it in an informed fashion. If you're going to use this term, be cognizant of the different connotations it can have. So these two folks, I mean, they're the best friends, right? They publish together, they work together. They both support, you could say, US Spanish, okay? They think it's wonderful, they want to promote its use. Neither one of them criticizes the way people speak Spanish in this country. Where they disagree is on this word. Should we use this word or not? Okay? There's a really good debate. If you just go to my website, you'll find it. There's a video. Take some Dramamine before I did the video, so it's like this. If you want, just go, there's a transcript, an entire transcript in Spanish. Give that to your students. Have them read it. Have them make a decision. Here's the basic arguments. Ana Celia says, the word Spanglish gets at a lot of the socio-historical repression of Spanish in this country. Es un término que usa el pueblo, y decirle al pueblo que deje de usar la palabra no va a conseguir jamás que dejen de usar la palabra. What we need to do is do a semantic reversal or infusion. Like, the word queer used to be really like a bad word and negative, and it was almost like an insult you would throw at somebody. That community took that word over and said, no, queer. Now we have queer studies, we have queer film, we have queer this. Queer is a verb now, okay? So they've associated a positive meaning to that word. So she's arguing, let's do that. Let's tell people, sí, yo hablo Spanglish, and here's what it is. Here's what it means. Mientras que el profesor Otegui dice, decirle a un joven que lo que habla es Spanglish, es básicamente decirle que lo que habla no es español. Es otra cosa, que necesita otro nombre. Y a mí no me gusta darle esa idea a los jóvenes. Yo prefiero decirles, tú sí hablas español. Claro, tiene ciertos contacto con el inglés, right? Lo puedes pulir, puedes agregar cosas, etc. Pero it is Spanish. And if I had a nickel for every student at UIC who told me, Maestra, I don't speak Spanish, I speak Spanglish. facepalm, you do speak Spanish. So I'm on his side of this debate. I get what she's saying. Maybe someday I'll change, I don't know. But right now, like my grad students, they cannot use the word Spanglish unless they're talking about the use of the word Spanglish, right? Yo creo que, como él dice, oculta más de lo que revela. Si dices que fulano habla Spanglish, what, does he code switch? Does he use borrowing here and there? Does he use calcos? What's the deal? Oculta más de lo que revela y pues tiene la posibilidad de ser interpretado de manera negativa. That's why yo, en lo personal, rechazo el término. I put this to my students. I make them watch the debate. I make them read the arguments. I make them come up with an opinion. This can form part of your curriculum, a curriculum driven by sociolinguistics, you could say. Okay? Some people say, we have to have them study grammar. They don't know grammar. And I never know what they mean when they say grammar. Are they talking about terminology? That they want our students, our heritage speakers, to know terminology? Pretérito, imperfecto, subjuntivo, all that stuff? Or are they talking about use? Okay, if they're talking about use, and you want to have them study grammar, I would say only focus on the forms that impede comprehension or that are strongly stigmatized. I think it's probably true that prepositions, sentence final prepositions, are probably stigmatized. I haven't done studies on this, but like, es la persona que he hablado con, or es la persona que hablé con. A lot of our heritage speakers will do this. My sense is that that would be considered inapropiado para la boda, and it's probably stigmatized. So if you notice your students are doing that, work on that. Okay? Not this. Fill in the blank with the present simple. Te usan el presente simple todo el tiempo. This will be a waste of your time. I was telling everybody yesterday, I once watched a teacher do a 50-minute lesson filling in the blank with articles. And I asked her, do they have problems? Your students have problems with definite articles? Well, yeah, sometimes. Like with words like colibri. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure that's the best use of your time. Now you have so little time with them. Is that something you really want to do? So not that. Do stuff that you know they have issues with. They have issues with gustar type verbs. They have issues with the subjunctive in irrealist contexts, although some sociolinguists probably argue, so what? Leave it alone. It's US Spanish. Okay? The use of gerund in subject position. Fumando es malo para la salud. Les voy a confesar una cosa. En mi programa, we work on this, porque he notado a lo largo de los años que siempre me ponen el gerundio en posición de sujeto. Like, caminando 10 minutos por día es bueno, blah, blah. And I thought, okay, I think that might be stigmatized, and maybe I need to get them to use the infinitive. So, les doy unos ejercicios, uno tras otro, y ya para el final, pues ya me ponen, me escriben, me llenan el huequito con el infinitivo. Y saliendo de clase me dicen, pues, caminando 10 minutos por día es muy bueno. And I thought, you know what? I'm not going to do this anymore. This is US Spanish. It's one of those moments where you say, I got to be sociolinguistically informed, and let it go, right? Now, in object position, some of them will do it too, like, la arrestaron por robando, okay? Some of them will do that there too. That, I think, tends to make people bristle a little bit more than fumando es malo para la salud. These are really difficult decisions, right? Deciding what grammar points you're going to work on. Have you ever noticed they use a instead of e for primera persona singular? I have yet to see a good explanation of why that might be the case. Is that something you want to target? Is it not? These are really hard decisions, what you want to target in your instruction. Contextualize them, never mechanical. Oh, a quick word about writing. Writing as a process. So many people today still do this thing where they say, van a escribir una composición, me lo entregan para el viernes. Well, and that's it. Student hands it in. You spend all weekend grading it. You miss Mad Men and Game of Thrones so that you can grade. You give it back to them, and do they pay any attention to those comments? That you missed your show to grade, okay? A much better approach is to have multiple drafts in which they must take into account, right, your feedback with these multiple versions. My students have to turn in my comments with their original, with their revision, and write a memo of here's what I did based on your comments. So that way, no perdí mi programa en vano, right? We also do brainstorming in class. I don't say, hágame esto para el viernes, sino que tomamos tiempo de clase, talking about the ideas, thinking about what they're going to write, okay? Who is the audience when you say, me vas a entregar una composición para el viernes sobre tu familia? ¿Para quién es ese trabajo? It's for me. I'm the audience. And what's the purpose? Why are they doing it? To get the grade. That's right. We've got to build into our writing process un público. Una señora va a escribir un libro sobre las familias latinas en Estados Unidos. Is that true? No, it's a big fat lie, but it doesn't matter. It's an audience that they've got in their minds that they can direct their text to. And then you teach them about how different audiences elicit different kinds of text, okay? And of course, this goes back to what we've been saying all along. Don't sit there with your red pen and every single thing put a comment on it. Sometimes we do that with our L2 students too, right? They just cannot absorb all that information at one time, okay? But you got to warn them. You got to say, no voy a comentar todo aquí en este momento. Porque a veces se enojan. They're like, I did everything you said. Y en la segunda versión les comentas más cosas. Y, you didn't tell me last time that was wrong. No, I didn't, because I'm going to do this little by little, okay? And be respectful when providing feedback. Don't cross out the aiga and say, no se dice, right? You can underline it. If you have a code, a lot of people use a code when they grade. Yeah, you use a code. And you could just put an I for informal, and then have them look for what the more formal term would be. We changed. I used to have them do 3 compositions in the semester, and they did 2 versions of each one. And I thought, what if they did 2 compositions, and they did 3 versions of each one? Me criticaron, dijeron, no, how can you have them do 2 compositions in a semester? Esto es la universidad. That doesn't seem like sufficient amount of writing. But you know, I replied that 3 times 2 is the same as 2 times 3. It's 6 texts that they're producing. And the quality of it, I should really write up a study on the analysis. I mean, this version 3 was so much better than this version 2, right? You know, when we write something, don't we revise it like 100 times before we send it out, okay? Finally, last point, look at the United States as a source of linguistic and cultural information, okay? Es muy bonito mirar hacia Latinoamérica. Es muy bonito mirar hacia España. También es bonito mirar al segundo país hispanohablante del planeta, right? There's literature, film, art, etc. Students can investigate their own communities. What we do at UIC, I've noticed, my students, my Latina students in Chicago, they have no idea about the Chicano farm workers movement in the Southwest. Ni idea, muchos. If they took Latino studies, maybe. They don't know anything about the New Rican Poets Cafe, right? They probably don't know much about the Cubanos in Miami, okay? So it's they're sort of like this. So what I've done with Arizona State University, they have this program called Hispanidades. So my students in Chicago do digital storyboards. And you have to clear the topic in advance, otherwise I'm going to get 40 students doing the murals of Little Village, right, in Chicago. You've got to have everybody do something different. And then the students in Phoenix, they do digital storyboards, and then we exchange them. So this is a really neat way for students where you are to learn about Latino students in other parts of the United States. So that's just another curricular idea I want to throw out there. Teachers. How do we prepare our teachers? A gringa is going to teach me Spanish. This is a really great article. I've had people ask me, I'm not a native speaker. I probably can't teach heritage speakers, can I? And then I said, well, if I thought that way, then I wouldn't be running the program because I'm not a native speaker myself. It seems to me we usually see 3 kinds of teachers who are teaching the heritage speakers. We see folks raised in Latin America or Spain, okay? The so-called native speakers. We see non-Latinos raised in the US who go and study abroad, like me, and learn Spanish, okay? And then we see US Latinos themselves, heritage speakers, becoming heritage speaker instructors. Of these 3 types of instructors, I have had the best instructors I've ever had, and I've had the worst instructors I've ever had. Doesn't matter where you were raised. If you have strong Spanish, you can be a good heritage speaker teacher if you are sociolinguistically informed. Okay? I think that's important to point out. Finally, if you are looking for more, I want more information, StarTalk. If you just Google StarTalk, probably, and National Heritage Language StarTalk, there you go. If you Google Heritage Language StarTalk, you will find this page. It is so awesome. It has 8 now they have 10 modules, I think. It's totally free. All you gotta do is sign up, get an account, okay? You click on each module, it's got videos of people, teachers, students talking, it's got text, it is absolutely amazing. So if you want to know more, if you have colleagues and you want them to understand a little bit more about how to be sociolinguistically informed, how to be a good heritage language teacher, and if you can't send them to Maria Luisa's Institute in July, it's in July, right?
Yes.
Okay.
No, it's June.
June.
June 1st to June 4th.
It's every summer, and it rotates around the US. Okay? Sometimes it's in Los Angeles, Chicago, now it's in Boston. If you can't attend that, this is your next best thing, to go through these modules. okay? And finally, this is just a tiny bit of moderately shameless self-promotion. The book that Maria Luisa mentioned earlier by Sarah, Cindy, and me, we try to summarize a lot of the things that, that I've just presented to you. So in conclusion, meeting students where they are, choosing materials that are relevant, looking to language arts, respecting their varieties, and being sociolinguistically informed. So I think I will pause here. Thank you very much.
But okay, so we're going to have some questions. Kim, you have to let us know maybe half an hour, 40 minutes. Let's see how the discussion goes.
Okay. I don't promise to have any answers, but I'll try.
Yes, I'm sure you will. Okay, so any questions, comments, reactions to the presentation? Besides, it was wonderful, enlightening, informative.
So who are the people who are teaching heritage speakers right now again? Okay. Or, okay, all right.
I'm teaching them, but
And you're at the high school level? Are the
Yes.
rest of you at post-secondary? No. Sorry? Middle school, okay, and?
So yes, we have college, middle school, and high school teachers.
And you have elementary. Elementary is largely uncharted territory at the moment.
Okay,
I will tell you that your presentation really reverberated with me because I was part of the first generation of actually Italian Americans who went to university, and while we were grateful to be there, we all thought it would be fun to take Italian so we could find out how badly we must have spoken Italian when we were kids, and I used it growing up in the same way that many of your heritage. We all got to the university, we took the course, I'll never forget it. 10 students, 9 of us were obviously Italian American, or several were of mixed backgrounds because of the close community contact between the Latino community and Italians where I'm from. And the professor got up the very first day and looked up and said, "Buongiorno." That means good day. And we all looked at each other and went, this is not going to be good.
Yeah.
And we all had a hard time. We all put it on back then, I won't tell you how many years ago, put it on pass fail.
Okay.
And then when I began to develop programs for heritage speakers of Italian, and then went on to develop them within our program for children who come from, who are Hispanohablantes, we found that we use very specific differentiated instruction. We have materials, but I do have 7 in my classroom this year out of a group of 24 in a one-way immersion program. And we're doing quite a bit of looking at this phenomena because it's something where the parents of our children really want their children. Obviously, some of them were born in other countries, came here at age 4 or 5, and pointed out that they've lost the language.
Right.
But your program is showing how to bring it back because so many of the ways that you work with them, I took down notes, materials that I think will be very interesting for our work too.
Right.
I have to say, as a victim of that Italian, I'll never ever forget it. My grandmother, who was very Roman, looked at it and said, "What is this?" And I said, "I don't know," because she taught me to read Italian.
Interesting. The K through 8 piece is really interesting. I was on a grant a couple years ago. We talked earlier about how most schools in this country start teaching foreign languages in middle school, like 13, 14 years of age. Some of us wait till high school. So what are you, 15 when you go to high school? Yeah? 14, 15? Yeah, so that's really, that ship has sailed. I mean, not entirely, but for the most part, that's just too late. We should start sooner. Last figures I read was that it's around 30% of colegios, K through 8 schools, or actually you could say K through 6, okay, elementary schools. About a third of elementary schools in the U.S. offer foreign languages, okay? Unfortunately, a lot of times that is, 30 minutes a day, a couple times a week. And if you look at the curriculum, You know, you ask, I've taught in Chicago groups of teachers, real hardworking, dedicated, wonderful teachers, and you ask them, what's your Spanish curriculum for first graders, you know, and they'll tell you, oh, colors, numbers, days of the week. Okay, yeah. What about second grade? Colors, numbers, days of the week. And then third grade, colors, numbers, days of the week. Maybe the months get thrown in there. There was no actual curriculum. There was no real expectation for proficiency, right? Chicago, actually, we mirror the national average, about 30%. About 30% of our elementary schools in Chicago offer Spanish as a second language to kids. And I'm like, this is great, this is wonderful. So you have these teachers, and they take these classes, and they show up with their textbooks, and all the kids are Mexican. So all the materials they have are really kind of useless for these kids. So I was really fortunate that a couple people I know wrote a grant. They got federal money. For 3 years, we worked on writing a curriculum for people who could, you know, I've been hired to teach Spanish to third graders. I walk in, they're all Mexican. What the heck do I do, right? What we need to do there is a couple things. Number one, look to our colleagues in bilingual ed, right? The ones, not the ones who are trying to transition, not the ESL ones. They're great people too, but that's not, we need to look at the folks who are developing heritage Spanish resources among children. And those would be our immersion friends. Our friends who do Spanish immersion, either one-way or two-way immersion. They have curricula. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Borrow from there. So we did some of that. And since we had this grant money, we also went to Tasco, Mexico. We went to Salamanca, Spain. And we met with language arts experts in those two countries, of course, with the very clear realization that we can't just import curriculum from these countries. We are going to look at it, get ideas, and then maybe adjust it for our local population. So if you're interested in that curriculum, it's available free online. That was part of the condition of the grant. It's on my website. I forget, it's so Ptowski.org. That's it. And just poke around, you'll find it. It's easy to find. If you don't find it, email me. But it's kindergarten through 8th grade, and we call them learning scenarios. So we didn't come up with anything. I'm not going to tell you this is like revolutionary. Like I say, our colleagues in dual language education have been doing this forever. We just happen to package this, right, as a K through 8 heritage Spanish speaker curriculum. It spirals. It does a bunch of cool things that we learned about during the grant. We had experts come in and talk to us and stuff like that. So if anybody's interested in the K through 8 heritage Spanish piece, that's a place you can go. Mm-hmm.
What else? Other questions or comments? We take advantage, aprovechen. Yes.
So, you know, I find myself lots of times, I don't think I need it kind of loud.
It's for the recording. That's what I said when they put the mic on me, but it's for the recording.
That's even worse. You're getting started with a microphone. You know, there's a gray area for me, just where you cross over, where you definitely have this sense of, well, you know, you hear "¿Qué tú haces?" or you hear, you know, "Tengo un appointment," and it does make you kind of, especially if you have learned the more of the academic track, but you also got some street Spanish, so you understand both. But there's still a part of you in there that says, you know, it just makes you cringe.
Yes.
So that area of gray area of cringe, how is that? And it's probably different for different people at different places.
Yes.
But how do you how have you moved from that to be that enlightened person?
Yoga. I'm only halfway kidding. The cringe is real. The cringe tells us that, I don't know if that's okay for the boda, right? The boda, the wedding.
Oh.
I don't know if that's okay. That's what the cringe tells us. Deep breath. And I'm not kidding when I say that. I have to tell instructors, take a deep breath and really think about it. Try to be objective about it. I don't have an easy answer to that question. There's no list that comes down from on high that tells us, you know, get over your cringe because this is fine.
Well, you know, a lot of the things you've said, I've kind of evolved. I think when especially if you've learned Spanish, and this could be whether you're a native speaker or not, but if you've learned that sort of academic track, it really, that goes like that. And there's a process where you start out and you have to get to that point where you accept it, and, you know, and you get to the point where I tell them, listen, yes, look at me, I'm some white lady that's going to teach you Spanish, but I know how to say, you know how many ways you can say pig in Spanish? And then we go through that one word.
Yeah.
And, you know, something like that. And I've used the lorry thing and
That's a
all
great
that,
one.
the lorry and the,
Instead of
but
truck.
there is that thing, especially when they're writing, and sometimes how to approach telling them you don't want to tell them it's wrong, but you want them to elevate their Spanish. That's what I tell them.
Right, it's the beach and the wedding thing. I mean, I think traditionally foreign language instruction, not just in this country, probably everywhere, I don't know, the goal was to make the students pass for educated monolingual speakers of the language, which is a problematic goal for many, many reasons. Number one, you're never going to be monolingual in anything if you're studying another language. I mean, right? Think about it. The most you're going to be is buy or try or whatever. You won't be monolingual in that language. Why should you try to pass for it? Number two, the educated thing. I sincerely believe, I have some colleagues, a lot of them are kind of old school, but not always the case. They would almost prefer to take the tabula rasa of the L2 kid and try to turn them into this educated native speaker person. They prefer that over this kid like Jose who shows up, right, with tengo un appointment and all this other stuff, right? Because that just, it almost reminds them that there's this whole socioeconomic class of humans out there that they sort of want to distance themselves from, they wish weren't there. It's really kind of twisted. You know, instead of realizing the syntax and the phonology and everything that this kid has, yeah, they have a few things that make you cringe. Get over it, right? Work with them and develop their Spanish, right? Yeah, I don't know if that speaks to what you're saying.
It's up to the point of developing different registers, right?
Exactly.
So depending on, you know, I all the time say, tengo un appointment, because I switch from English to Spanish constantly, with my kids, with my husband, with my work, every day. So for me that's normal. Whenever I go back to Spain, my mother doesn't speak a word of English. I not only go back to Spanish, but I go back to the dialect with which I grew up. Mm-hmm. And I start using words from Bable, Asturian dialect. It comes to me naturally. So I think it's moving from one register to another,
Right.
and so that they are aware of when to use what.
Exactly.
That's the...
And like we said earlier, they understand that concept, right? You speak differently to your boss than you do to your best friend. They can do that in English. They just don't have practice doing that in Spanish. They understand the concept, but they don't have the language to do it. So we're just giving them that language to be able to do it. And you just nailed it. The beach and the wedding thing is register. That's what it is.
There's a question upstairs.
Yeah, I was just going to comment as to what I do in my classroom, and I think I've moved away from saying it's right or wrong. But when something, I always tell them, my job is to teach you formal Spanish. Mm-hmm. And when they say that, I say, for example, I said, if I were to meet Obama, I can't go, yo, Obama, what's up? Ooh, 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 ah, right? I said, that's what I would do with my friends, but that's not what I can do with Obama. And I tell them, so when we meet Obama, when you are here, I want you to use the best sophisticated Spanish you know. When you're with your gente, with your homie, with your panas, you can use it.
Right.
And then I validate it. I say, okay, you want to say queque. Ugh, I cringe. But I say, all right. You say queque, I say bizcocho, some people say pastel, and I make a list on the board. All right, these are all the words that you use. How do they say in Guatemala? How do they say here? And I validate it, because the important thing is to validate and say, that's the way they say it over there? Great. And when we're not talking formally, I'll use it too, so that they say, oh, miss, that's so cool. You know how to say it. Absolutely.
Right.
But when you're writing for me, when I'm, I kind of put them in the context and say, okay, right now, we have to use the sophisticated Spanish we know.
Right. Yeah.
And when you go in this environment, we have to use the sophisticated Spanish that we know.
Right.
When you're with your peeps, I know, I'm from New York, I can break it down real quick. But when I speak to my principal, my boss, I have to use the best English I know.
Right.
And kind of make that distinction.
The most formal, not best, most formal, right?
The most, or the best that I know. Because, not all of them are going to bring out the words that an adult's going to bring out.
No, sure.
They'll have to do. So I always try to make that distinction and move away from I still cringe. I'm like, oh, can't believe she just said
cringing
that.
is going to be there, and it affects all of us.
But I do validate, and I make them aware that they just used informal. And I was like, okay, Keke, do you know another word for that? Because we're doing formal right now. and then have them kind of make that distinction and have that in their repertoire.
I like that you use formal, and I might ask you to think about, you use the word formal, maybe is better than even the best, because the opposite of best is worst, right? So we don't want them to say, well, if this is best, then that's worse, right? I like your use of the formal. I also like when you point out that I validate everything. We don't validate people's way of speaking as a touchy-feely kumbaya kind of. That's not what it's about. It is inaccurate at best and damaging at worst to not do so. So I think that's a really important point. And I'm glad you brought up Obama. You know the anger translator, Luther, the anger translator? If you don't know Luther, the anger translator, no, you need to go on Google. It's Key and Peele are a comedy duo. And what they do is they have, I forget who's Key and who's Peele. One of them acts like Obama, and he sits there and he says, my fellow Americans, in this day and age, and he's speaking in what we would call very formal English. And then Luther, the anger translator, comes in and he uses African American English features. There's a conflation that I'm not super happy with, which is conflation of African American features with anger. That's why he's called the anger translator. That piece I don't like so much. But I get what they're doing, and Obama, they did the press, what do they call it? The correspondence dinner, and he had Luther, the anger translator, come, and it was brilliant. So you could show that to your students. You know, Obama's using formal English here, and Luther is using informal English here.
Okay, was that like let me see if I understand this. Obama really did show up, and that was the Luther guy was there?
Obama has seen Key and Peele's skit, I'm sure, so many times. Obama's kind of getting made fun of, and it's not really. It's poking gentle fun at Obama that he speaks very properly, that he needs somebody to translate for him to black people, right? That's what it's saying. So what he does when he gives, in real life, the real Obama, giving the correspondent dinner, invites this comedian to play out, to be the anger translator. It's comedic gold. But you can show that to your students so that they understand on another layer. You know, the beach and the wedding, who knows if they really get that? Do Luther.
I like that. That's more up my alley.
Now, I got to point out, some of it is, you know, not PG-13. You probably can't play some of Luther to your students. But there are some clips that are clean that I've actually played for my children. So, you know, some of it's okay.
Bueno, yo voy a preguntar en español, si está bien.
Claro que sí.
Bueno, yo llegué aquí a Massachusetts hace 2 años y llegué a trabajar en la Universidad de Massachusetts en el Departamento de Estudios Latinoamericanos e Ibéricos. Y me contrataron porque soy especialista en traducción. Tenemos muchos estudiantes que son estudiantes de lengua materna o que lo que llaman ustedes heritage speakers, ¿no? Aquí. Y es muy chistoso porque yo no he tenido clases con estos estudiantes formalmente en clases diseñadas para heritage speakers, pero los tengo en las clases de traducción. Los tengo en las clases de traducción y la idea de estos estudiantes cuando entran a la clase de traducción es que ya han pasado por las clases de español donde se supone que tendrían que nivelar su español para poder traducir. Eso es muy optimista. No lo han logrado.
Es que en 16 semanas, que es un semestre.
No, se supone que son 2 años antes de llegar a las clases de traducción. Bueno, pero no estoy tratando de criticar que no tengan el nivel. Ese no es el objetivo del comentario. Más bien mi pregunta, y ahora que estábamos hablando de traducción, va orientada hacia el uso de la traducción en las clases de lengua. Yo sé que es muy criticado y también he enseñado lengua extranjera. He enseñado inglés, he enseñado francés como lengua extranjera y era una biblia casi siempre que se decía no enseñen a traducir porque eso no va a ayudar a los estudiantes a comunicarse. Yo no estoy completamente de acuerdo y veo que en las clases de traducción, cuando tengo a estos estudiantes que tienen un español muy mediano, los motiva mucho poder traducir y hacer esto en un registro que los hace sentirse muy capaces de poder comunicar otra cosa que hacer una receta de cocina o pedir una cerveza en un bar. Entonces yo quería preguntarte, ¿tú qué piensas de la traducción como herramienta pedagógica con estos estudiantes?
Yo creo que podría ser muy útil porque pues la realidad es que la mayoría de estos chicos en sus trabajos, por apellidarse Jiménez, pues les va a tocar traducir de todos modos, aunque no tengan, ¿no?, el estudio formal de la traducción. Así que yo lo veo súper bien. Claro, habría que ver en qué momento del programa se incorpora. O sea, yo en lo personal no me gustaría, ni lo estás proponiendo, que el programa Heritage se dedicara únicamente a eso, ¿va? Pero puede haber una clase, debe haber una clase. No tenemos en mi universidad, hace falta gente muy capacitada, como tú, que dicte esa clase, pero creo que podría ser, o sea, como curso en sí debería estar, incorporar algunos ejercicios quizás de traducción dentro del programa, ¿por qué no? Yo en mi programa, la única vez que les pedimos que traduzcan, es con las palabras de transición, ¿no? Ahí sí, les damos textos en inglés con el however y todo esto, y que eso lo traduzcan. Pero ¿se podría ampliar? Creo que sí se podría ampliar. Se tendría que pensar bien para qué fines y qué tipos de textos les pediríamos, ¿no?, que traduzcan.
Yo en algún momento incorporé un pequeño taller de traducción dentro de mi curso y le pedí a un colega mío que fuera, porque es el que da el curso de traducción, a hablar un poco sobre la traducción. Y a los estudiantes los preparé un poco reflexionando sobre qué tipo de traducciones hacen ustedes en la vida cotidiana, etcétera. Analizamos varias como citas de autores que se refieren a lo que es la traducción. Son dos visiones de dos mundos, se puede traducir o no completamente. Y él dio una clase y las 2 veces que lo he hecho, los estudiantes quedan encantados porque obviamente la traducción es un proceso complejísimo, sí. Hay que tomar tantas cosas en consideración. Hicimos algunos ejercicios y eso les encantó. No he tenido la oportunidad de saber cuánto de eso pudieron aplicar, pero estoy segura que el panorama de ese campo se expandió. Así que, no sé, quizás se pueda seleccionar una clase dentro de las 16 semanas. Nosotros tenemos 14, así que siempre creo que es un tema muy interesante cuando se lleva a lo profesional.
Claro.
No es el paso de una palabra a otra. Hay mucho que considerar si es una traducción técnica o es una traducción literaria.
Claro.
Y es fascinante, ¿no?
Y muchos de nuestros estudiantes de niños traducían o interpretaban para sus familiares. Casi todos mis estudiantes, los que son el primer hijo o el segundo hijo, más que nada, traducían para sus papás.
Sí, y ahí también tenemos que enseñarles que una cosa es traducir y otra cosa es interpretar.
No, claro.
Con eso también tenemos, muchos vienen con la idea de que van a trabajar después en la ONU o que quieren ayudar en sus comunidades y hacer interpretación comunitaria, ¿no? Ahí todavía nos falta, digamos que esta parte del programa donde yo trabajo es una parte muy pequeñita de un major que es Latin American and Iberian Studies, es lo que tendría que decir, pero muchas de las cosas que dijiste en tu intervención realmente las reconozco en mi enseñanza con estos estudiantes porque una traducción es una versión. Claro. Una traducción siempre es una versión y una versión siempre es para un público particular. Es lo que uno siempre tiene que intentar que ellos aprendan, pero también es difícil porque uno tiene que evaluar esas traducciones que están escribiendo. Entonces claro. es muy difícil. Ahí veo la zona gris muy claramente.
No, a mí me encantaría tener aquí la vara mágica para, ¿no?, hacer que desaparezcan estas zonas grises, pero no existe.
No sé si hay algún otro comentario. ¿Pregunta? Sí.
Sí, a mí me interesaría saber, como sabe tantas estadísticas de este tema, quizás sepa si en las universidades, si solo se puede abrir un curso para Heritage Speakers, ¿a qué nivel tiende a ser el primer curso que se abre?
Depende muchísimo del lugar. Por ejemplo, si estás en el suroeste, vas a tener mucha gente como Carolina o incluso más allá, generacionalmente. Si es en Nueva York, puede ser que sea un poco más como Chicago, donde solemos tener más hijos de inmigrantes. En Miami, donde está Andrew Lynch, mi colega, hay de todo. Hay Robertos, hay Carolinas y hay 30 más que no he perfilado acá. Entonces realmente depende, o sea, en una misma ciudad como Miami, puede ser que en FIU, ¿sí?, el perfil estudiantil promedio sea una cosa y que en la Universidad de Miami sea otra. Realmente no hay respuesta a esa pregunta.
Gracias.
Ya. Por lo que se sabe de la población hispana en este país, la gran mayoría, el 63% tengo entendido, es de origen mexicano. De ese 63%, no sé exactamente, seguro lo tengo en la computadora en algún lugar, qué porcentaje llega a qué edad, ¿no? Eso quizás te daría, pero claro, de esos quienes llegan a qué universidades, tampoco, olvídalo, no sé, no es. Dependería del lugar, creo, sí.
¿Qué haces en un caso como el que a mí me tocó? Que lo necesitamos aprender. A mí me contratan para atender un grupo de Heritage Speakers, de Heritage Learners, high school. High school, la peor edad para tener a los muchachos tranquilos.
¿Cómo le dices tú, Mar? ¿Aborrecencia?
La aborrecencia,
Sí.
exacto. La edad de la aborrecencia. Y de repente, por supuesto, yo llego y no me dan absolutamente cero material, pero tú vas a darle la clase a los Heritage Learners, ¿no? En condiciones de que podría yo a lo mejor tener a los 4 o 5 tipos de estudiantes que tú mencionaste, y en la edad de la aborrecencia. Entonces, ¿qué hace uno? Sobre todo los primeras primeras 3 semanas, ¿qué hace uno para poder ubicar al alumno, poder saber qué tipo de materiales vas a dar y cómo arrancar con este tipo de estudiantes?
Bueno, después de llorar mucho.
Ajá. Sí, esa parte la pasé.
Esa parte la pasaste con
Y
muchos
después.
clics. El librito verde aquí, en el capítulo 10, lo que tiene es como un flowchart. ¿Cómo se dice flowchart? Diagrama de flujo.
Exacto.
Bueno, el flowchart.
Suena mejor en inglés.
Idealmente eso lo harías antes del primer día de clase, pero existe el caso como el que acabas de describir. Entonces, el primer paso sería asesorar a los muchachos. Vamos a suponer que tienes 25 muchachos ahí, ¿no? Darles 3 writing prompts, ¿no? 3 writing prompts. Temas. Por ejemplo, número 1, se deben de requerir los uniformes en todas las escuelas públicas. 2, cosas que ellos, de los 3, pueden tener una opinión. Y les pides que te llenen una hoja en español. Los llevas a casa y ves, ¿qué tengo acá? ¿No? Un 80% quizás sea esto y otro 20% así. Eso te da, it's quick and dirty, pero te da una manera por lo menos de ver qué es lo que tienen por escrito. Porque en la mayoría de los casos lo que trabajamos con los Heritage Speakers es la redacción, lectura y redacción. Hay quienes quieren enfocarse en lo oral, public speech, etc. Maybe not. Let's. So you've got your writing samples, okay? Y el siguiente paso sería a ver, ¿qué pueden hacer bien? ¿Qué es lo que no pueden hacer? ¿Okay? Tienes tu lista de las cosas que ves que tienen problemas con esto, tienen problemas con el otro, etc. De esa lista de cosas que no hacen muy bien todavía, eliges, ¿verdad? ¿Qué es lo que a ti te gustaría que aprendieran? Y you build your syllabus based on that. Claro, ¿el libro perfecto va a existir? No hay ningún libro de texto perfecto, pero hay varios libros de texto para Heritage Speakers, tanto para high school como para universitarios. Aquí en esta página web tengo también las editoriales, como bien sabes, te dan el table of contents gratis online, pero también los tengo escaneados y los tengo acá para el que lo quiera ver, los de high school y los de college, ¿verdad? Libros de texto para Heritage Speaker. Vas viendo los table of contents, los que más o menos parecen tener cosas que quieres, pues pides la copia, lo miras. Puede ser que tengas que, aunque los editoriales no quieren esto, too bad, agarras un poco de aquí, un poco de allá, las cosas que tú quieres enseñarles y adelante.
Sí, sin embargo, eso es después de un análisis, pero yo al día siguiente tengo que llegar con mis muchachos.
No, ya, les pones a leer.
Durante esa semana, ¿qué es lo que se hace?
Leer, ponles a leer.
Los muchachos de high
hablar.
school no leen, no los puedes tener 10 minutos sentados con un texto, no puedes, es imposible, no sé.
No, yo he visto,
pero no se puede. Entonces, a lo que voy es, yo al día siguiente tengo que enfrentarme nuevamente con mis muchachos. Y me va a tomar tiempo hacer cuando mínimo una semana, llegar a la casa, hacer ¿cómo se llama? El análisis, seleccionar los materiales, poder saber qué es lo que voy a dar para las siguientes clases. Durante esa semana...
¿Qué hiciste tú? Como si estuviste en esa situación.
Me enloquecí. No, pero
¿qué hiciste?
¿Qué es lo que hice? En el salón precisamente, hice muchos experimentos. Por ejemplo, les llevé, y fue un experimento muy tonto de mi parte, pero muy bueno porque aprendí que no sirve. Mafalda, creo que todos sabemos quién es Mafalda, ¿no?
Les pilla muy lejos Mafalda.
Sí, no, pero a lo que voy es, Mafalda es cómico, se pueden identificar el cómic, bla, bla, bla. Pero porque tenía un cómic que eran los chistes, pero venían una serie de preguntas referente a los chistes. O sea, estaba perfecto para que el alumno disfrutara el chiste y luego hablara del chiste. Sin embargo, el gran problema es que Mafalda, uno es de mi generación, no de la generación de los muchachos. Entonces, cuando yo llego muy feliz, emocionado con mi Mafalda, pues todos me ven con cara de, ¿y este qué le pasa, no? Y entonces quiero que lo lean y que lo compartan y no lo están compartiendo. Entonces, error, ¿no? Ahora, ¿cómo resuelvo el problema que yo mismo ocasioné, ¿no? Entonces, lo que hice durante varias semanas, yo creo, era estar seleccionando temas, videos, estar viendo, pero al mismo tiempo estoy perdiendo el tiempo para ver.
No,
para
no estás
poder,
perdiendo el tiempo. No,
para
no, no.
poderse hacer el sílabo.
Mira, algo tenías que hacer.
Sí, claro.
Hiciste lo que se podía hacer. Yo creo que si nos sentamos con calma, que ahora con las preguntas que hay, this could be an hour-long conversation where we sat down and figured out what you could do. I don't think I can give you a real, here's what
No,
you do.
no,
Here's the, you know.
No, of course no, pero con toda la experiencia, o sea, ¿qué podemos los novicios, profesores novicios de Heritage, qué se puede hacer la primera semana cuando llegas y dices, no tengo materiales? Ahora, ¿qué podemos hacer en lo que yo construyo todo el material? ¿No?
Bueno, that's an excellent question. It sounds like what we need to develop in the field then is the emergency kit.
Okay.
The Heritage Speaker Emergency Kit, para exactamente
Yeah.
lo que tú propones.
Yeah.
Un grupo de personas
Yeah.
experimentadas en esto nos sentamos, desarrollamos algunas ideas y lo soltamos ahí por
I
internet.
would love that. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds wonderful.
Dos cosas. Lo de los videos, I think, is excellent. If you can show them videos. Your
Videos.
video idea is fantastic. Y yo voy a discrepar un poquito con la idea de que no se puede conseguir que lean. I have seen a lot of high schools, inner city high schools in Chicago, do, ¿cómo le dicen? Free self-selected reading. Es unas siglas, un acronym de estos, ¿no? Free self-selected reading, donde cada viernes durante 20 minutos hay una bibliotequita y los chicos van, y si quieren leer People en español, leen People en español. Si quieren leerse el Quijote, se leen el Quijote. Lo que ellos quieran leer, lo que sea de acuerdo con sus propios intereses. Al principio, claro, hay uno que otro que se duerme, que trata de teclear, que no. But I have seen it work. I have seen it work. And when it's independent, self-selected reading, se supone que el estudiante mismo se motive a hacerlo.
But that's what you mentioned. Cuando es algo que ellos decidieron hacer.
Sí.
Pero cuando estoy ahí con los muchachos y les dices, vas a leer ahorita
No, yo
5
no dije
minutos
que
o
tú
10
les des
minutos.
la lectura, sino que ellos elijan la lectura.
Sí, no, sí, es difícil. Okay.
Bueno, vamos a
Thank
trabajar
you.
en el Emergency Kit entonces, con tu ayuda.
I would love that. Yeah.
Sí, sí.
I want that.
Sure.
Sí, yo diría que quizás sería interesante involucrarlos a ellos en este proceso y preguntarles, pues, ¿tú qué puedes aportar a la clase? ¿Tú qué traes? ¿Qué sabes tú que quizá no saben los otros estudiantes? Y también preguntarles cuáles son los temas que les interesan e intentar escucharlos, pero de verdad, y traer algo de lo que ellos dicen. Porque muchas veces uno no sabe todo lo que ellos saben y que va a ser beneficioso para todos. Entonces esas primeras semanas en que uno está un poco perdido y no sabe ni de dónde son, ni cómo son, ni qué saben, ni qué experiencia tienen, sacar eso como material.
Y la verdad, si lo hacemos bien, esto casi lo repetimos todos los años. Porque puede ser que tienes 10 años de experiencia, tienes tu sílabo, tu currículum, tienes todo y llegas y de repente hay un grupo muy diferente de otros grupos. So if we're really doing our job, we're reassessing our curriculum every single year. Now, I can't afford to do that with 250 students every semester, 8 TAs. I mean, I need a book and a syllabus and here we go. Entonces, cada X años lo que sí hago es me toca el año que viene, una evaluación de todo el programa. Una muestra de su español cuando entran, otra muestra cuando salen y una serie de preguntas cortitas que contestan ellos. What did you like the best about this class? Y Y luego de ahí hacer ajustes, ¿no? It's a big ship, so I got to make my things very slow in the right direction, right? But your point is very well taken. If we're doing this right, I mean, every year we're trying to adjust our curriculum to our students as best we can.
Otra cosa que yo pensaría que también podría ser útil para chicos que están en esa edad es darles como no les gusta leer mucha cantidad en un principio, es interesarlos a lo mejor en un tema, pero con artículos cortos, y que ellos vayan a algo específico. Uno les tiene que dar como el por qué tienen que leerlo y tratar de buscar esa información con un objetivo final de una discusión en 3 días más, y dar diferentes textos que estén en el mismo tema a diferentes chicos, cosa que cada uno aporte, y eventualmente tener una conversación socrática o tener algo así como academic conversation con ellos, y enseñarles que vamos a hablar sobre este tema, ponerles a lo mejor temas que se contraponen, y textos que tengan esa contraposición, cosa que cuando ellos vayan tengan algo que decir, algo que les permita algún tipo de debate que los haga poner lo que ellos traen más la información que reciben. Ese tipo de cosas nosotros lo hemos hecho con nuestros octavos, y la verdad es que hay algunos que se apasionan y quieren saber más, y uno cuando ve el interés les da otro. Hay otros niños que no se interesan, pero hay muchos que sí se van a interesar. Entonces tú le dices, mira, pero no mucho, porque si tú le das mucho a lo mejor lo ahogas, pero si le das justo, ellos van a querer más, creo yo. Yo haría una cosa así.
Bueno, solamente quiero comentar sobre la idea de Elena de escuchar lo que tienen los estudiantes, porque hay varios artículos en el campo donde la idea de students' voices, ¿no? Las voces de los estudiantes es lo que todos los maestros tenemos que oír en cualquier clase, digo, eso ya se sabe, pero creo que acá es como que vamos tomando conciencia poco a poco otra vez de que sí, los materiales, mucho del sílabo tiene que venir de lo que oímos de ellos, y tener, o sea, yo empecé mi carrera enseñando con adolescentes, ¿no? Y era fascinante descubrir que saben más de lo que uno cree, y no sé, preguntarles de dónde vienen, cuáles son sus historias, compartan, qué hay de similar, qué hay de diferente. Yo creo que eso hasta a ellos mismos les sorprendería muchísimo, y también, bueno, ¿y cuál es la historia que está detrás de todo esto? Entonces, pues, sacar todos estos temas de no es lo mismo ser un inmigrante mexicano que un dominicano, de una diáspora, y de ahí puedes sacar cualquier cantidad de temas que ellos estarían fascinados investigando sobre ellos mismos, sobre sus compañeros, por qué esto dijo así, por qué este dijo asado. Bueno, ya tienes el curso armado. Pero también me pareció muy interesante, así como estamos casi fijados en la idea de enseñar gramática, esta idea de que tenemos que tener el sílabo antes de que esté el curso. No, es que realmente, y ayer lo comentábamos, ¿no? Nuestro sílabo siempre, bueno, podemos tener algo para el website, porque ahorita nosotros ya nos piden que tengamos el sílabo del otoño, ¿ok? Pero obviamente ponemos el sílabo de lo que quiera la administración o lo que tengamos, pero va a cambiar. Y no solamente cambia de aquí a que empiece el semestre, a lo largo del semestre. Este tema nos sirvió, o este tema ya nos quedamos 3 semanas en lugar de 1. Entonces, esta idea de tener la estructura hecha es que no es cierto. Eso no pasa. Y también esta idea de además de llorar y la yoga, y tener la idea de, bueno, así es, y vamos con hay ciertas metas que hay que cubrir, pero creo que partiendo de ellos hay muchísimo que sacar, ¿no?
Otra cosa importante también, sobre todo con los teenagers, es la relevancia que tiene para ellos, porque a veces nosotros ponemos temas que son nuestros temas, pero cuando son temas que a ellos les importan y que son universales, porque la verdad es que no han variado mucho de generación en generación, son los mismos, ellos realmente enganchan súper bien, y viene mucho de ellos, ¿verdad? Sugerencias de ellos que nos enriquecen aún más o abren las perspectivas, y como bien dices tú, uno tiene como una idea de lo que quiere, y aunque uno trata de hacer como bien estructurado, es tanto lo que trae el mismo estudiante que tiene que ser flexible el programa, porque si no, no hace sentido.
¿Tú quieres comentar?
Sí.
No, muy bien.
En español, ¿hasta cuánto se exige usar el idioma, por ejemplo?
Excelente pregunta.
Porque esa cosa, porque el problema muy grande que yo he visto a través de los años es que uno le dice en español, exige en español y le contesta en inglés, y sabemos que eso es un comportamiento, eso no es, ellos ni siquiera se dan cuenta que están hablando en inglés, ellos lo tienen los dos así.
Claro, claro. Ay, me encanta esa pregunta porque es muy difícil. Por un lado, pedirles a nuestros jóvenes, en mi caso, criados en Chicago, latinos, hablando español con los papás y los mayores, y inglés con gente de su edad, con sus coetáneos, pedirles que hablen solo español con sus coetáneos, con sus peers, es pedirles que violen, ¿no?, un patrón sociolingüístico de toda la vida. ¿No? Yo con otros Chicago latinos, I speak English. I only speak Spanish with people who don't speak English. Period. That's how it goes. De vez en cuando I might code switch with my friends, pero I don't speak monolingual Spanish con gente como yo. So we're asking them to violate that principle, okay? Which is very hard for them. Como dices, a veces ni siquiera se dan cuenta de que they're code switching, right? That they're using one language or the other. So I know in my program with my TAs, I've told them, this is not like, you know how basic language programs today are supposed to be 104% in the target language, like you're never supposed to use English at all.
90% of that?
Right? I've read some interesting work suggesting, you know what, maybe that's not, how do we know that using English 5% of the time wouldn't in fact result in better Spanish acquisition? How do we know that? We drank the Kool-Aid that it has to be 1,000% in the target language without really investigating other options. So that's another piece of food for thought, right? The sociolinguistic, you know, the patrones que tienen, the fact that we really don't know what the use of English might do to promote the acquisition of Spanish or the development of Spanish, right? So I tell my instructors, do not insist on monolingual Spanish. Yet, I did have one instructor, I visited her class, and I noticed not only were all of the students using all English all of the time in all group work activities, they were also answering her in English all of the time. That, to me, the pendulum has swung too far. We don't want that either. So I'm thinking aloud here with you and brainstorming. I'm not sure what to say. We want to encourage and promote Spanish use. I have one TA who says to her students, look, you paid how many thousands of dollars in tuition to be here. You can speak English anywhere. I'm trying to create for you a space where you can speak Spanish. Please do so. I don't like the participation points. How much Spanish did you use? I'll give you more points. That I don't think is feasible for us, or at least I wouldn't care to implement it, I think. I don't really have a good answer for that. I did tell this instructor, you need to, and she did improve. I don't know what she did. You know, I don't think she used any scare tactics. Look, you got to use more Spanish, but I'm not answering your question at all. It's a really good question, though.
Well, it's hard because if we're promoting the Spanish language, and the students are answering in English all the time, and it's just so ingrained in them, you know, and you just want to say, 9 million times, habla español, por favor.
Yeah.
You know,
And some would say, well, the instructor needs to use 104% Spanish all the time, and then that helps. I can't do that. You've probably noticed. I don't. It's hard for me with bilingual Latinos. I think I've been in Chicago so long now que a mí me cuesta estar en español toda la clase. Maybe some would argue that's your job and you should do it and they would benefit more from it. I would disagree. My sense is that nos llevamos mejor because I'm employing language practices that they themselves also employ. And there's a number of other reasons why I think code switching by the teacher is justified.
Well, I think that it has been a wonderful discussion and a wonderful way to end the 3
With-
hours.
with-
You
with
thought that it was
incertitude,
going to be too
okay.
long, but- Así que bueno, muchísimas gracias. Estaremos en contacto y bueno, gracias, Kim.
No,
Un
gracias a
gran
ustedes.
aplauso.
Muchas gracias a ti y a todos ustedes.